Chapter 237. The ability to predict the outcome of a bet. Fu Wanqing and Dou Tianlu couldn't help but look at each other when they heard this. In their eyes, Sumo was only a mid-nascent soul cultivator. Did he really have such an ability? They were doubtful. Dou Tianlu smiled. Brother Su, it's not that we don't believe you. It's just that what you said is too unbelievable. I'm willing to bet with you. What do you think? Dou Tianlu took out a pigeon egg-sized, blood-red gem from his pocket. A blood spirit stone. It was an extremely rare item found only in the chaotic god's mainland. Although it was called a blood spirit stone, it was not actually a spirit stone. Instead, it was a natural treasure. A blood spirit stone was a material used to forge a deity-grade artifact. Brother Su, do you know what this is? Dou Tianlu asked. A blood spirit stone. Sumo smiled. Although he had never seen a blood spirit stone before, his sixth senior brother, Lu Tianzhan's inheritance, had some knowledge about it. Brother Su, you have a good eye. Do you know how to forge artifacts as well? Dou Tianlu praised. This was because not every cultivator could recognize a blood spiritual stone. I only know a little, Sumo replied modestly. In fact, with his six senior brother's inheritance and his current realm, Sumo was definitely a master in forging artifacts. Brother Su, you are indeed talented. Dou Tianlu smiled. Today, let's use this blood spirit stone as a wager. Let's bet on the outcome. If Brother Su wins 4 rounds, I'll give this blood spirit stone to you. What do you think? When Sumo heard this, he could not help but smile. Brother Dou, you are very generous. You should know that I win every bet I make. Sumo, I don't deserve this. Sumo's words were half joking and half serious. Fu Wanqing and Dou Tianlu laughed at the same time. To be honest, they hoped that Sumo would win. After all, they had something to ask of Sumo. How do we bet? Sumo asked. Let's make it simple. Dice. Dou Tianlu said. In order to be fair, Shitty Fu will be the banker, but he won't place any bets. Both of us will place our bets back to back. Each round had a total of 7 cups, and whoever won the most would be the winner. We could just write our bets on the jade slips. All right, we'll do as Brother Dou says. Sumo understood and nodded in agreement. Fu Wanqing lightly clapped his hands, and a servant brought over a dice shaking cup. There were a total of 21 dice, 7 shaking cups, and 14 blank jade slips. Fu Wanqing looked at Sumo and Dou Tianlu and said with a smile, both of you know the rules. In a while, you're absolutely not allowed to use your spiritual sense to probe, otherwise it won't count. That was the rule of the Chaos God's continent. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a matter of luck or skill, but rather a matter of cultivation level. Sumo and Dou Tianlu both nodded. All right, begin. Goodbye. Fu Wanqing spread his arms. 7 shaking cups flew up at the same time. 21 dice flew into the shaking cup. Each cup contained 3 dice. Whoosh, whoosh. Fu Wanqing's hands didn't even touch the shaking cups, but the 7 shaking cups danced up and down in a beautiful and rhythmic manner. It was like butterflies flying and hundreds of birds chirping. Even if he was a nascent soul cultivator, to be able to do something like this was a rare sight. Sumo silently nodded as she watched, because this meant that Fu Wanqing could probably control 7 treasures at the same time. His skill was definitely not ordinary. At this time, Dou Tianlu's eyes were closed, as if he was concentrating on listening to the sound of the dice rolling in the shaking cups. This was a common method used by many skilled gamblers. However, it was easy to listen to 1 cup, but 7 cups in a row was a mess. How could they tell? Whoosh, whoosh. Fu Wanqing controlled the shaking cups with ease, and then suddenly dropped them. The 7 shaking cups landed on the table almost at the same time, forming a straight line. The shaking of the cups really showed his skill. Sumo nodded with a smile. Dou Tianlu took a deep breath and nodded as well. Both of you, please place your bets, from south to north, in order. Fu Wanqing smiled, and, at the same time, he pointed at the order of the 7 cups. Sumo and Dou Tianlu each picked up a jade slip, recorded their 7 bets, and then gave them to Fu Wanqing. There were a total of 7 rounds, and each round had 7 cups. In the 7 cups, whoever placed the most bets would win. After the two handed over their jade slips, Fu Wanqing waved his hand, and all 7 cups were opened. Big, small, small, big, 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 Fu Wanqing said. When the results came out, Dou Tianlu's lips curled up, because he knew that he had placed all 7 bets correctly. No matter how good Sumo was, it could only be a draw. However, Sumo's expression was very calm, and nothing could be seen. Fu Wanqing didn't look at the 2 jade slips either. Instead, he raised the cups again. Whoosh, whoosh, just like before, the 7 cups danced up and down. A moment later, they suddenly dropped. Sumo still looked very calm, while Dou Tianlu listened very attentively each time. The two once again picked up a new jade slip and recorded their bets inside. Then, Fu Wanqing opened the cups. Small, 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 big, big, small. When the results came out, Dou Tianlu couldn't help but look at Sumo, because he once again hit the jackpot. In terms of gambling skills, Dou Tianlu was very confident. In the entire Forgotten Capital, he could easily rank in the top 3. However, Sumo only smiled faintly. In short, Fu Wanqing raised the cups 4 times and opened them 4 times. Sumo and Dou Tianlu both recorded their jade slips 4 times. After the 4th time, Dou Tianlu looked at Sumo and smiled. Brother Su, I think we should open the jade slips, Dou Tianlu said, because Dou Tianlu himself knew that his 28 bets were correct. Huh? Sumo also laughed. I think we should let Brother Fu finish this 7 times. At that time, it won't be too late to reveal it. All right, Dou Tianlu was a straightforward person, because he was thinking that Sumo might also be correct. What if the winner couldn't be determined? So, Fu Wanqing once again raised the cup. The 5th round, the 6th round, the 7th round. A total of 7 by 7, 49 times. Recorded the jade slips, opened the cups. Everything was completed. Fu Wanqing looked at Sumo and Dou Tianlu and asked with a smile, "The two of you, what do you think of the battle? Brother Dou, what do you think? If I remember correctly, 7 by 7, 49 cups, I should be correct." Dou Tianlu laughed. Huh? Although Fu Wanqing knew that Dou Tianlu's gambling skills were good, he was still shocked when he heard that he was correct. What suspense was there? What about Brother Su? Fu Wanqing asked Sumo. I should still win. Sumo laughed. Oh. Fu Wanqing became interested. Little brother, please look at Brother Dou's 7 jade slips. Sumo said. Okay. Fu Wanqing replied. Then, Fu Wanqing took out Dou Tianlu's 7 jade slips one by one. He instilled his divine sense, and it instantly appeared. Big, small, small, big, 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 big. Small, 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 big, 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 small. A total of 49 cups, and the result was correct. At that moment, Fu Wanqing couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air, because although he was the one who shook the cup, he couldn't do it himself. Dou Tianlu smiled. Brother Dou, you're really amazing. Sumo sincerely praised, because if Sumo didn't have the second senior brother's inheritance, she would definitely not be able to do this. Brother Su, do you still have a chance of winning? Fu Wanqing laughed, because it was already impossible to win. Of course. Sumo nodded with a smile. Huh? Fu Wanqing was stunned, then waved his hand, open. Fu Wanqing opened Sumo's 7 jade slips at the same time. The 7 jade slips shone brightly and immediately appeared. Chapter 238. The 7 jade slips each shone brilliantly. 7 projections appeared in the room in an instant. Before this, Dou Tianlu had already won 49 cups without a single mistake. In theory, Sumo had no chance of winning. The biggest miracle was a draw. Therefore, when Sumo confidently said that she would win, Fu Wanqing and Dou Tianlu did not believe it. At that moment, they even thought that Sumo was a little frivolous. However, when Sumo's 7 projections appeared, their faces changed abruptly, because, no matter what, they did not expect that the situation would be like that. Sumo and Dou Tianlu's gambling method was actually very simple. Without the banker, they were just competing among the idlers. Whoever won the most rounds would win. 3 dice. Big meant that the sum of the numbers was from 11 to 17, and small meant that the sum of the numbers was from 3 to 10. It was already a miracle that all the numbers were correct. However, looking at the results of Sumo's jade slips, it was simply a miracle of miracles. The first jade slip, big, respectively 3 points, 5 points, 3 points, small, respectively 1 point, 1 point, 3 points, small, respectively 2 points, 1 point, 4 points, large, respectively 4 points, 5 points, 6 points, large, respectively 4 points, 4 points, 4 points, 3 points, large, respectively 5 points, 3 points, 6 points, large, respectively 4 points, 6 points, 6 points. The second jade slip, small, respectively 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, small, respectively 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, small, respectively 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock, small, respectively 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock, large, respectively 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, large, respectively 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock, small, respectively 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock. The third jade slip, the fourth jade slip, the fifth jade slip, and the sixth jade slip were all the same, except for the last jade slip. The first 6 jade slips not only correctly guessed all the sizes, but also accurately wrote the specific number of each cup. On the 7th jade slip, in addition to the big and small numbers, there was also a sentence. Brother Doe, all 49 rounds were correct. This was Sumo's prediction before the results were out. At this time, there were only 3 people in the room: Sumo, Fu Wanqing, and Do Tianlu, as well as 2 servants. This scene stunned all of them on the spot, because this couldn't be called gambling. This was called divine divination. Everyone knew that Sumo could not cheat. That was because the jade slip was always placed beside Fu Wanqing. After opening the cup, it was impossible to change it. In fact, according to Sumo's true realm, if she really wanted to cheat, she could basically do this. However, Sumo didn't need to. Second senior brother's inheritance allowed him to foresee all of this. Everything that happened in the gambling house was within his expectations. After being stunned for a moment, Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu applauded at the same time. All right, amazing, the two of them said in unison. For a moment, they couldn't find a better word to express their feelings. Within the Forgotten Capital, these two were considered important people. They had seen many chaotic God Realm cultivators coming and going, not to mention nascent Soul Realm cultivators. They even knew many Soul Transformation Realm cultivators. However, this was the first time they had seen someone like Sumo. Divine divination. This round had almost exceeded the scope of a gamble, because if you gamble, you might lose. However, the ability that Sumo displayed was clearly foresight. That couldn't be called a gamble. This was because the entire situation was under Sumo's control. She knew everything clearly. Brother Su, I concede defeat. Do Tianlu praised sincerely. He was sincerely convinced. At the same time, he handed the spiritual bloodstone to Sumo. You have to admit defeat. I hope Brother Su doesn't mind this wager. He. Sumo smiled and took the spiritual bloodstone. Then, she said, Brother Do, you're too kind. Actually, the gambling house just now was a draw. Because we only said to bet on the size, we didn't say to mark the number. This little brother was only acting on the spur of the moment, and it was somewhat superfluous. If I had said it clearly, Brother Do might have been able to do it. Sumo's words were very good. I'll accept this spiritual bloodstone. However, I have 2 soul-cultivating pills here. I hope you two will accept it. Consider my meeting gift. As she spoke, Sumo flipped her hand, and 2 soul-cultivating pills appeared in her palm. The soul-cultivating pill was red and had a medicinal fragrance. It was a peak nascent soul realm pill. It could help nascent soul realm cultivators in their soul transformation realm, but it wouldn't have a decisive effect. Even so, the soul-cultivating pill was definitely a good thing for nascent soul realm cultivators. Its value was even higher than the spiritual bloodstone. However, there were many pills of this level in Sumo's pill storage bottle. These were just some pills that Sumo had made in the past 100 years to familiarize herself with third senior brother's inheritance. Soul cultivating pill. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu didn't expect Sumo to be so generous. Of course, they wouldn't stand on ceremony, because it was indeed what they needed. Brother Su, do you also know alchemy? The reason why Fu Wanqing asked this was because if one didn't know alchemy, a nascent soul realm cultivator in the middle stage would never give a pill of this level as a gift. I only know a little. Sumo was modest again. However, after the gambling house, Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu had a whole new level of respect for Sumo. She knew a little about refining weapons and alchemy. However, to what extent, it was not convenient for them to ask. However, they were full of confidence in Sumo's performance in the gambling house. Come, Brother Su, let me toast to you. Do Tianlu raised his cup. Please. Sumo raised her cup to greet the two. The three of them drank a cup together. Then, the three of them chatted and became familiar with each other. The atmosphere was much more lively than before. From their conversation, Sumo learned that these two were not only the managers of the Jujin Inn, but also the disciples of the Wangdu Mountain. The Wangdu Mountain was a medium-sized immortal sect in the northern region of the chaotic gods' mainland. Therefore, Sumo gained a better understanding of the Wangdu city and even the chaotic gods' mainland. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 different dishes, Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu looked at each other. They had something they needed Sumo's help with. However, they had only just met each other, so it wasn't appropriate for them to ask. Sumo could tell that the two had something to say, but she hesitated. Brothers, if there's anything you need, just say it. If I can be of help, I will definitely do my best. Sumo's words left her mouth. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu were a little embarrassed. Fu Wanqing smiled. Since Brother Su said so, it seems like we're lucky. To be honest, Brother Su, we do have something that we need your help with. Oh, Sumo smiled. What is it? A bet. Fu Wanqing said slowly as he looked at Su Mo. Chapter 239. A bet? A must-win bet. What bet? Sumo smiled at Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu, waiting for the rest of the story. Sigh. It's a long story. Fu Wanqing sighed. Brother Su, perhaps you've heard of the chaotic gods continent's southern region having 3 capitals? Southern regions, 3 capitals? Su Mo nodded. The jade scroll that Guanxiong had given him did contain such a description. The so-called 3 capitals were the Forgotten City, the Dream City, and the Ghost City. These 3 ancient cities formed a triangle with a distance of 30,000 li between them. The Forgotten City was the northern crossing of the chaotic gods continent, with 3 interregional transportation arrays, making transportation convenient. The Dream City was prosperous, known as the largest city in the southern region. The Ghost City was a strange city. It was widely recognized that the cultivators of the Ghost City were the most powerful and strange. There were also a few special ancient sects around the Ghost City. Thus, there was a saying in the southern region of the chaotic gods: travel in the Forgotten City, enjoy in the Dream City, cultivate in the Ghost City. It could be said that each of them had their own characteristics. What does the bet have to do with the 3 capitals of the southern region? Sumo asked. Fu Wanqing smiled bitterly. Brother Su, we cultivators pay the most attention to cultivation resources, spirit stones, and treasures. The chaotic gods continent is rich in all kinds of minerals. 3 months ago, a top-grade spirit stone mine was discovered in the center of the 3 capitals. Oh, Sumo was surprised. Even nascent soul transformation, and deity tribulation cultivators couldn't ignore top-grade spirit stone mines. 1 top-grade spirit stone was equivalent to 100 high-grade spirit stones, which was equivalent to 10,000 mid-grade spirit stones. Most importantly, for soul transformation realm and deity tribulation realm cultivators, only high-grade or best-grade spirit stones could provide them with some spiritual chi that they could directly absorb. Middle and lower-grade spirit stones no longer held any significance from the perspective of cultivation. Thus, a top-grade spirit stone mine, no matter how big or small, was enough to attract attention from all sides. The 3 capitals have disputes on how to mine and divide the spirit stone mine. Sumo immediately grasped the crux of the problem. That's right, Fu Wanqing said. Among the three capitals, in terms of strength, of course Go City is ranked first, and Wang City is the weakest. Therefore, at the beginning, my Wangdu City only proposed 20%, and Mengdu City and Guichan City would each get 40%. This division is reasonable. Sumo estimated that Forgotten Capital City had some self-awareness. Fu Wanqing shook his head, but what we think is reasonable, others may not think so. Mengdo agreed with this division, but Guido disagreed. They insist on taking 50% and don't care how the other 50% is divided. But the bottom line of Dream Capital is no less than 40%. Do Tianlu added helplessly. But Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu both shook their heads. Sumo laughed. Of course he understood. Ghost Metropolis and Dream Metropolis actually wanted to squeeze Wangdu dry, but 20% was Wangdu's bottom line. What is the realm of the strongest cultivator in our forgotten capital city? Sumo asked. There are 3 great perfection soul transformation cultivators in Wangdu City. Fu Wanqing said. 3 great perfection soul transformation cultivators. Sumo nodded inwardly when she heard this. Although Wangdu was one of the 3 capitals of the southern region, it was actually a second-rate city on the chaotic gods continent. There were 3 great perfection soul transformation cultivators in such a city. Compared to the Whitebone mainland, the difference was like heaven and earth. One had to know that on the Whitebone mainland, a great perfection soul transformation cultivator could sweep through everything. Unless one encountered 1 or 2 deity tribulation cultivators on the Whitebone mainland. What about Mengdu and Guichan? Sumo asked again. Mengdu has at least 1 early deity tribulation cultivator, and Guichan has at least 2. Fu Wanqing looked at Do Tianlu, seemingly unsure. Brother Su, this is all an estimate. After all, the strength of each city is a secret, and no one will easily reveal it. However, the strength of Ghost Metropolis and Mengdu is definitely above Wangdu, Do Tianlu said. So, were we the ones who suggested a bet to determine the winner? Sumo laughed. We are ashamed. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu smiled bitterly at the same time. This was because this idea was proposed by the head shopkeeper of the Gold Gathering Inn. The management of Wangdu City was managed by the Council of Elders. There were a total of 7 people in the Council of Elders, and they were all soul transformation cultivators. At the same time, they had some prestige in Wangdu City. One of them was the head shopkeeper of the Gold Gathering Inn. On that day, the Council of Elders sent 3 people to negotiate with Mengdu and Guichan. The head shopkeeper of the Gold Gathering Inn said this out of anger, because if they were to compete in techniques, Wangdu City did not need to compete at all. Which soul transformation cultivator could resist a deity tribulation? Gambling was a fair competition in the southern region of the chaotic gods continent. However, as soon as the words left his mouth, the head shopkeeper of the Gold Gathering Inn regretted it. Because there was a difference in cultivation level, even in gambling techniques, he could not win. It seemed fair, but in reality, it was still a competition of cultivation level. However, as soon as he said it, the representatives of the other 2 families agreed. It was impossible to take it back. Therefore, on that day, they agreed to bet against each other at the mine 3 months later, and the winner would be decided by 3 bets. If it was a draw, another round would be added. In any case, the winner would be decided by gambling. Whichever city won would be allocated according to that city's plan. Of course, Wangdu City's plan was still 20%. However, whether Guichan or Mengdu won, they would only have 10%. Therefore, Wangdu City was the only one at a disadvantage, because, in theory, it had no chance of winning. The 3 cities had merely turned a martial arts battle into a gambling match. This was also a good way to avoid casualties. After all, the 3 cities of the southern region had to jointly protect this mine and prevent other forces from interfering. What are we betting on? When are we betting? Sumo asked. The 3 cities will each come up with a gambling method, and the matches will be 1 round. This will only be known on that day. The cities will definitely come up with their most confident gambling method. The date will be 7 days later, Do Tianlu said. Brother Su, are you willing to help us? For many days, we have always wanted a gambling expert, but unfortunately, we have not been able to find one, Fu Wanqing asked. Since we have met, both of you think highly of sumo. We are fated, and I'm willing to give it a try. However, I cannot guarantee that I will win. Sumo had to leave some leeway in his words. This was his first time in the chaotic gods continent. If the other party had a tribulation god, then it was hard to say what would happen. This time, Sumo only wanted to see the power of the chaotic gods continent. All right, Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu were overjoyed. If Sumo agreed, they would have a glimmer of hope. Otherwise, they would not have any hope at all. Brother Su, since you have agreed, we will immediately introduce you to the head shopkeeper and the elders of Wangdu City. The Elder Council had promised that if anyone could help Forgotten Capital City obtain the mining rights of the 10% Supreme Grade Spirit Stones, they would be given 1,000 Supreme Grade Spirit Stones first. At the same time, you will become an honorary elder of Wangdu City. You will not be involved in managing the city's affairs, but you will enjoy many privileges. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu said. They understood that although Sumo did not necessarily want these benefits, they had to give them. I'll listen to my two elder brothers' arrangements. Su Imo smiled faintly. Chapter 240. One bet, 10% of the mine. It seemed like child's play, but it was actually a game between the three capitals of the southern region. Sumo naturally understood this, but he still agreed to the bet for Forgotten Capital City. Sumo didn't have to get involved in this mess. Of course, the reason in his heart was not simply that they were fated. Rather, he wanted to see the strength of the Chaos Gods continent, especially the strength of the Ghost City. Behind the Ghost City, there might be a mysterious immortal sect, the Corpseless Sect, because in the jade slip that Guanxiong gave him, there were 4 words marked on the location of the Ghost City. Ghost City without corpses. No corpses. Corpseless Sect? Sumo thought that there might be a connection between the two. According to the Mute Master, the Corpseless Sect wanted to control the White Bones, which forced the Holy Wheel Grandmaster to kill 20,000 members of the Selectant Sect. For Sumo, the Corpseless Sect had a kind of don't-give-in feeling. He was a little curious and a little resentful. However, Sumo knew almost nothing about the Corpseless Sect. Therefore, Sumo agreed to the bet. Of course, Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu were very happy and immediately brought Sumo to the Elders Guild in Forgotten Capital City. The Elders Guild was an ancient castle in Wang Capital City. It was only a few dozen li away from the gold gathering inn. The 3 of them arrived in an instant. From afar, the ancient castle was dozens of feet tall, and it was completely built with gray stone blocks. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu had already sent a message saying that they had found a casino expert. Thus, as soon as they arrived at the castle, 2 cultivators with their attendants greeted them. They were 2 intermediate soul transformation realm cultivators. They were wearing golden robes, and the cultivator behind them was a nascent soul realm cultivator in a gray robe. Of the 2 soul transformation realm cultivators, one was stout and looked like a merchant. The other was thin and had a cold expression. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu quickly introduced Sumo. The one who looked like a rich merchant was the manager of the gold gathering inn, Jean Mantang. Sumo snickered in her heart. As expected of the head shopkeeper of the gold gathering inn, to actually have such a name. Could it be that he's a greedy person? The other soul transformation stage cultivator was called Huolingjun. In the Forgotten Capital, he came across a huge artifact shop. It was said that all kinds of magical treasures were sold inside. They were all members of Wangdu City's Elder Council. Sumo had met Jean Mantang and Huolingjun before. Jean Mantang had already received the message from his 2 subordinates and was currently beaming with joy. That was because he was the one who had blurted out the suggestion, so he had been under the greatest pressure during this period of time. Welcome, Brother Su. Welcome. Jean Mantang addressed Sumo as his brother despite his status as a soul transformation realm cultivator. Shopkeeper Jean, you're too kind. Sumo smiled calmly. without a trace of nervousness. This kind of temperament was not something an ordinary mid-nascent soul cultivator could possess. Everyone present nodded their heads in agreement. In Sumo's eyes, an intermediate stage soul transformation realm was not considered an expert. Everyone chatted as they entered the castle. Inside the castle, there were 5 cultivators waiting. The 4 men and 1 woman were all dressed in golden robes, and their cultivations were all at or above the intermediate stage of the soul transformation realm. Among them, there was an elder whose cultivation was at the great perfection soul transformation realm. This time, it was Jean Mantang who introduced Sumo one by one. The elder at the great perfection soul transformation realm was called Zhuge Hong, and he was the great elder of the Elder Council. The other 3 male cultivators were all at the intermediate stage of the soul transformation realm, and they were Guoleng Yi, Fan Xingyun, and Kong Fangzi. The only female cultivator was at the late stage of the soul transformation realm, and her name was Lu Ru. Her figure was enchanting, and her beautiful eyes sparkled. She was an alchemy grandmaster. Among the 7 great elders of the Elder Council, other than Zhuge Hong, the other 6 had rather large immortal properties in the city. They had medicine shops, magic weapons, formations, spirit stones, and other industries. This Elder Council could be said to have monopolized the main industries of the entire Wangdu city and also controlled the operations of the entire city. They were the true controllers of Wangdu city. However, Sumo did not see the other 2 great perfection soul transformation realm cultivators. Presumably, those 2 almighty cultivators did not participate in the daily management and instead focused on their cultivation. They would not appear unless there was a major event. Sumo greeted everyone one by one and exchanged a few words with them. Everyone in the Elder Council was extremely polite to Sumo. This was because Do Tianlu's gambling skills could be said to be illustrious in the entire Wangdu city. For him to admit defeat, it was enough to show how powerful Sumo was. Zhuge Hong represented the Elder Council of Wangdu city and once again reiterated, if Sumo could help them obtain the mining rights of the top-grade spirit stones, they would first give her 1,000 pieces of top-grade spirit stones. Then, she would directly become an honorary elder of Wangdu city and enjoy the same privileges as them. Naturally, Sumo said a few humble words and nodded in agreement. Thus, they arranged for all the members of the Elder Council, Fu Wanqing, Do Tianlu, and Sumo to go to that gambling house 7 days later. At the same time, they had decided, and Wangdu city's side set a dice gambling house. This was because Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu had personally seen how powerful Sumo was and felt that they had a higher chance of winning. Of course, Sumo did not care. At the same time, they also briefly introduced what kind of gambling house Mingdu and Go City might set up, who would gamble, and so on. Sumo noted them down one by one, and also had a rough idea in his heart. In the evening, the Elder Council set up a banquet, and everyone drank and chatted merrily, and became more familiar with each other. Then, accompanied by Jean Mantang, Fu Wanqing, and Do Tianlu, Sumo returned to the Jujin Inn to rest. This day, just like that, passed. In the guest room, Sumo was alone, sitting cross-legged on a cattail hassock. Early stage of deity's tribulation. Sumo first looked inside his dance sea, and the unwithering chi flowed. Now that Sumo had advanced to the deity's tribulation, he had already begun to cultivate the 3rd realm of the unwithering technique, unwithering soul. The chi did not wither, the bones did not wither, and the soul did not wither. The unwithering soul could help Sumo advance to a higher realm of the deity's tribulation. Sumo took out the red dust ancient fan and gently opened it. The unwithering soul's incantation was actually in his mind. Sigh. Sumo sighed softly. In fact, this sigh, he himself did not know what to sigh about. Sumo gently stroked the red pendant with his hand. The 2 words red dust slowly appeared. However, this time it was not emitting a faint red light, but a purple light. It was really magical. At this time, Sumo did not know that it was actually the heart of white bone. Red dust, Sumo said to himself. However, He had never been able to figure out what these two words meant. At the same time, Sumo took out the dust Siv Sutra from the abode of the soul-storing altar. Unfortunately, there was still not a word. Regarding this existence that was like a heavenly book with a total of 9 pages, Sumo only knew that it was made of the same material as the red dust ancient fan. Human skin, or the skin of a powerful cultivator. What was the dust Siv Sutra? Sumo did not understand. Humph! At this time, the little white pig crawled out, humming. Sumo understood that this guy must be hungry when he came out. Fortunately, now Sumo had a lot of elixirs. However, the little white pig's taste was already bad. What he ate now was basically the elixirs of the nascent soul level. At this time, if Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu knew that their elixirs were treated the same as the pigs raised by Sumo, how would they feel? Foodie! Sumo laughed and scolded, giving Hump 3 elixirs. Then she put away the red dust ancient fan and the dust Siv Sutra, and finally took out the soul-storing cauldron, which was the broken copper bowl. Chapter 241. 7 days later. The gates of Wangdu City opened. The elders of Wangdu City, led by Zhuge Hong, brought Sumo, Fu Wanqing, Do Tianlu, and the others to the mine at the center of the 3 capitals. Everyone rode on the wind, and there were many followers. It was as if a group of immortals had descended. In these 7 days, Sumo stayed in the Jujin Inn, concentrating on preparing. With the abilities of these soul, transformation stage, and nascent soul stage cultivators, even if they didn't use any powerful spells, it would only take them less than half an hour to reach the mineral deposit. Looking from afar, it was an empty valley, but there was smoke and a faint purple glow. Sumo narrowed her eyes, and with one look, she could see that there were treasures underground. It was indeed an extraordinary place. At this time, the valley was already guarded by the cultivators of the 3 cities. Once an agreement was reached, they would start mining. This mine was said to be enough for the 3 cities to use for 4,000 to 5,000 years. It was quite rich. When Sumo and the others arrived, the people of Mengdu City were already there. Zhuge Hong and the others went over to greet the elders of Mengdu City. Sumo just watched from behind, because he was a secret weapon, so it was not convenient for her to go forward. The elder of Mengdu City was a middle-aged cultivator in embroidered clothes. He was also at the great perfection soul transformation realm, and his aura was not ordinary. The 3 capitals of the southern region actually had a good relationship with each other. Otherwise, they wouldn't have settled the dispute in such a peaceful way. The cultivators of Wangdu City and Mengdu City also greeted each other. In less than a quarter of an hour, close to 100 cultivators flew over from the southwest. They were the people of Mengdu City. However, the Mengdu cultivators' wind manipulation technique was different from the Wangdu and Mengdu cultivators. That was because there seemed to be a faint layer of black gas under their feet. However, that layer of black gas was very faint. If one didn't pay attention, it was almost unnoticeable. Sumo didn't take it to heart. After all, each sect had their own secret techniques, so it wasn't surprising. Ha ha ha. The leader of the Mengdu City was an old cultivator. However, he was dressed in a black robe, was tall, had a full beard, and looked quite arrogant. Before he landed, his laughter could be heard. Fellow Taoist Zhuge, fellow Taoist you, sorry to keep you waiting. I'm late. Forgive me, forgive me. As he spoke, the ghost city's cultivator landed on the ground. Fellow Taoist old ghost, how have you been? Zhuge Hong cupped his hands with a smile. Brother old ghost, long time no see. The great elder of Dream Capital, Yu Jiqing, also cupped his fists and bowed. Long time no see, how have you been? I trust you have been well since we last met, ha ha. Old Ghost laughed loudly, looking very enthusiastic and forthright. Sumo sneered in her heart, because this kind of people who looked forthright on the outside were often treacherous people. On the contrary, those who looked cold and indifferent were often kind-hearted. The first impression the old ghost gave Sumo was not good. The people of the 3 capitals exchanged pleasantries. At this moment, 3 people flew over from afar. As it turned out, for the sake of fairness, the 3 capitals had jointly invited 3 prestigious cultivators from the Azure Fushan Mountain in the southern region of the chaotic gods as witnesses. The 3 cultivators were He Yunzhang, He Yunxiao, and He Yunsheng. They were blood brothers and were all at the great perfection of the soul transformation realm. Usually, the Azure Fushan Mountain and the 3 capitals had good relations. That was why the 3 of them were invited to be witnesses. Once the 3 of them arrived, they naturally exchanged pleasantries. At this moment, all parties had arrived. He Yunzhang looked at the great elder of the 3 capitals and said with a smile, "It's getting late. I think we should start the battle. First of all, I would like to invite all the elders to let your guests show themselves." The great elder of the 3 capitals nodded. Zhuge Hong nodded slightly at Sumo. Sumo smiled and walked a few steps forward into the arena. Then, Sumo cupped her hands at everyone present. "I am Sumo. Today I will fight for the forgotten capital city." Sumo? The people of Dream Capital and Ghost Capital looked at Sumo and frowned slightly. Mid-stage nascent soul cultivators were a dime a dozen in the southern region of the chaotic gods. Was there no one else in the forgotten capital city? Why would they send a mid-stage nascent soul cultivator to participate in the bet? If they were to send a nascent soul cultivator, they would recommend Do Tianlu from a Gathering Gold Inn. How could such a mid-stage nascent soul cultivator win? However, this Sumo looked unfamiliar. Could it be that she was an expert invited by the forgotten capital city and had some ability? The people of Dream Capital and Ghost Capital had their own thoughts. However, overall, they were somewhat disdainful of the forgotten capital city sending a mid-stage nascent soul cultivator to gamble. Then, an old cultivator walked out from the Dream Capital City's group. His hair was white and he had a goatee. His body was slightly hunched and he was as thin as a stick. Cough, cough, cough. Cough, cough. The old cultivator was still coughing like a sickly person. However, when the sickly old man appeared, the people of the Forgotten Capital and Ghost Capital's expressions changed. Thousand Hands, sickly immortal, Zhong Booty. Do Tianlu couldn't help but gasp. This was because the Thousand Hands, sickly immortal was an immortal of gambling. His gambling skills were well known in the Southern Territory. It was said that his original name wasn't Booty, but because he had been gambling for thousands of years and comprehended Tao through gambling, he changed his name to Booty. Zhong Booty implied that he wouldn't lose a single bet in his life. Zhong Booty was a late-stage soul transformation cultivator and wasn't from the Dream Capital. However, since he was willing to gamble for the Dream Capital must have not only paid a huge price, but also needed a lot of face. Otherwise, they definitely wouldn't be able to invite this immortal of gambling. The Forgotten Capital City had also thought of inviting him, but they really didn't have any connections. Zhong Booty? At this moment, not only were the people of the Forgotten Capital shocked, but the people of the Ghost Capital also had a slight change in expression. This was because they were afraid that if the Dream Capital won the bet, they would propose a plan to occupy 50% of the mine. And from the looks of the fact that the other party invited Zhong Booty, this possibility wasn't impossible. Haha, old sickly immortal, why are you here? Listen to me and quickly go back. The Ghost Capital's old ghost laughed. How much did you Jichen give you? The old ghost, will pay you double. You are here. Why are you still gambling? Not to mention the small third capital, even in the entire chaotic gods southern region. Who can win against you? The old ghost's words were half true and half false. He seemed to be forthright, but in reality, he was mocking Zhong Booty. Hee hee. Cough, cough, cough. Zhong Booty rolled his eyes and looked at the old ghost. Damned old ghost. This sickly old man took someone's money to eliminate disasters. Don't say anything. If you think highly of me, why didn't you find me earlier? I am actually willing to gamble for the Ghost Capital. What a pity. Hee hee. In a while, regardless of whether I win or lose, I still have to go to the Ghost Capital and ask for a cup of good wine from you. Zhong Booty wasn't at a disadvantage with his words. Ha ha. Everyone laughed along. However, the moment Dream Capital's Thousand Hands, sickly, immortal Zhong Booty appeared, the atmosphere changed. Because he was an immortal of gambling, It was a form of intimidation. Well said. When the time comes, I will make you, this sickly old man, die. Ha! The old ghost said. At the same time, the old ghost waved his hand, and a cultivator quietly walked out from behind him. That cultivator wore a purple robe, a purple cloak, and a purple hood on his head. His entire body was covered up, and it was impossible to see his face clearly. However, looking at his figure, he was actually a female cultivator. A female cultivator. A female gambler. Chapter 242. As soon as the purple-robed female cultivator appeared, everyone was taken aback, because they had never heard of any female cultivator in the chaotic gods' southern region who was good at gambling. However, since she was willing to gamble for Ghost Capital, she was definitely not an ordinary person. Not to mention anything else, that Ghost City's old ghost was definitely an extremely shrewd person. He would definitely not arrange for an ordinary female cultivator to participate in this gamble. After all, that city's top grade spirit stone mine was not a joke. The cultivators of Wangdu and Mengdu all felt their hearts tighten. Zhuge Hong stole a glance at Sumo. Yu Jiqing also narrowed his eyes. At the same time, everyone carefully looked at the purple-robed female cultivator. Was that a soul-dissolving cultivator? Or what level of cultivator was she? Everyone present could not see through her cultivation level, because the purple cloak on her body was very strange. It should be a special magic treasure. It could conceal one's cultivation level and aura. At this moment, even Sumo frowned, because he actually could not see through the female cultivator. Whether it was her appearance or cultivation level, they were all hidden in the purple cloak. Old Ghost observed them and was slightly proud. Everyone, this is our Ghost Capital's gambler. Little brother Su, old sickly ghost, you must go easy on me later. I am Guaying. Greet fellow cultivators and seniors. The purple-robed female cultivator bowed slightly. Her voice was quite pleasant to the ear. However, after saying that, she did not say anything else. She was another strange person. At this moment, many chaotic gods, southern region cultivators had gathered around. The three cities' competition to determine the division of the mineral resources was considered to be quite a lively event. Therefore, it attracted many southern region cultivators, many of whom came from tens of thousands of miles away. Today, it could be considered a small gathering of southern region cultivators. The three gamblers stood in the field, each with different auras. Zhong Bufu had been famous for a long time. The purple-robed female cultivator was extremely mysterious. Only Sumo looked the most normal, but also the least special. At this moment, almost everyone thought that Wangdu City would lose without a doubt. Other than the people of Wangdu City, no one thought highly of Sumo. Green Floating Mountain Cultivator He Yunzhong spoke again. Since the three of you are ready, let us use the simplest method of drawing straws to determine the order of appearance, as He Yunzhong spoke. He opened his hand, and 3 balls of light appeared in his palm. These 3 balls of light are divided into 2 types, A and B. 2 are A and 1 is B. The one who caught would be the first to bet. Then, they would bet with the person who caught the second. The loser of the first round would have to bet first. The one who can win 2 rounds will be the winner. If all 3 cities win 1 round each, then we'll add another round. During the duel, both sides can choose an elder to bet on. If the 2 duels are tied, then the duel will be a draw. Similarly, another question was added to the bet. Do you understand? The rules were actually very simple, and there was a lot of room for improvement. Therefore, the 3 of them understood and did not have any objections. All right, He Yunzhong nodded slightly. With a flick of his hand, the 3 balls of light flew up. 3 balls of light, DME 1B. Of course, everyone wanted to catch B, because then they could see the abilities of the other 2. Therefore, the moment He Yunzhong threw out the balls of light, Zhong Bufu made his move. The others did not see the old man do anything. They only saw his thumb and index finger pinch together. A ball of light was picked up by him. How could a soul transformation realm cultivator be ordinary? The female cultivator in purple waved her long sleeves and took the second ball of light. Only Sumo was the last, because there was only one ball of light left. There was no other way because Sumo's cultivation was the lowest. She was at a disadvantage when it came to drawing straws. However, Sumo smiled calmly. The people of Forgotten Capital City could not help but frown slightly, because the first to fight was at a disadvantage. All right, please crush the balls of light and see if it's A or B inside, he and Zhang said with a faint smile. The three of them crushed the balls of light almost at the same time. Hua! However, in an instant, the crowd was in an uproar. The female cultivator in purple covered her face, so her expression could not be seen. A dark glint flashed across Zhong Bufu's eyes. He had a bad feeling in his heart. This was because Zhong Bufu and the female cultivator both had the word A in their hands. Only Sumo had the word B in her hand, and a look of surprise flashed across Sumo's face. It seemed like he did not expect to fight in the second round. This result was somewhat unexpected. After all, Sumo was the last to draw straws. Although in theory, the odds are the same for those who caught first and then caught second. The three of them were gambling experts, so they were naturally different. Sumo was the last to make a move. Thank you for letting me win. Sumo cupped her fists and smiled bitterly. Hee hee. Then the old man and this young lady will go first. In a while, we will spar with little brother Su. Zhong Bufu smiled insincerely. In his heart, he had already started to pay attention to Sumo. The female cultivator in purple did not say anything. Sumo took a few steps back, waiting to see how the two would bet. Young lady, what shall we bet? Zhong Bufu asked the female cultivator in purple. I'll leave the first round to you, senior. The female cultivator in purple said in a humble tone. Hee hee. Zhong Bufu could not help but laugh dryly. Since that's the case, I won't stand on ceremony. Let's compete in rolling dice for the first round. How about it? Rolling dice was the simplest and most common method of gambling. Zhong Bufu was a gambler, an immortal gambler who had been immersed in gambling for thousands of years. Naturally, he would use his most confident method for today's gamble. Dice heat. Seeing Zhong Bufu's choice, Do Tianlu could not help but smile at Fu Wanqing. Back then, the two of them had personally witnessed Sumo's prowess. Of course, there were many ways to play with dice. However, they felt that Sumo was more confident in rolling dice. How do we play? Senior, please tell us. The female cultivator in purple said. Young lady, let's bet on guessing. 7 dice cups will be placed in 7 dice cups. We will shake the cups once, and the one who guesses correctly will win. If it's a draw, we will shake the cups again. The one who guesses correctly will win. How about it? 7 cups, each with 7 dice. Moreover, it was guessing. This level of difficulty surpassed what Sumo had played in the gold gathering in. It could be said to be a perverted level of gambling. When everyone heard this, they felt incredulous, because it was impossible to guess. Do Tianlu also frowned. The difficulty of 7 dice was many times higher than 3 dice. Sure, the female cultivator in purple nodded. Sumo was at the side, calm and unruffled. This was because no matter how many dice were added, the difficulty was the same to her. Zhong Bufu waved his hand, and someone brought out a tray. On the tray, there were a total of 9 shaking cups and 90 dice. The 3 witnesses had checked the shaking cups and dice to ensure that there were no mistakes. There were spare shaking cups and dice. Zhong Bufu gestured for her to start. However, the female cultivator in purple said, Senior, please go first. Zhong Bufu did not stand on ceremony. With a wave of his hand, he took out 7 shaking cups. At the same time, he pointed with his other hand, and the 49 dice entered one after another, landing directly in their respective cups. Ding, ding, dang, dang. The shaking cups and dice were not made of ordinary materials. When the dice entered the cups, they gave off a crisp sound that was pleasing to the ear. Young lady, listen up, Zhong Bufu said. Then, Zhong Bufu's hand gesture changed. The 7 shaking cups danced up and down, sometimes like dragons swimming out of the sea, sometimes like strange pythons flipping their bodies. Ding, ding, dang, dang. Ding, ding, dang, dang. The sound were chaotic. Chapter 243. 7 shaking cups danced in the air. 49 dice clanked against each other. At that moment, the entire place was silent. There were gambling experts among the cultivators of the 3 cities. They were all using their own methods to distinguish the number of dice. Do Tianlu of the Forgotten Capital squinted his eyes, his ears twitching. However, his brows gradually furrowed, and the furrow became tighter and tighter. That was because, with 7 dice rolling, not to mention distinguishing the number, even distinguishing the size was extremely difficult. Who? Finally, Do Tianlu let out a breath of turbid air. He gave up. This gamble was beyond his capabilities, unless he used his divine sense to peek at the shaking cups. However, he would be discovered immediately. No one would do such a stupid thing. Boom! Hua! At that moment, Zhong Bufu's hands pressed down, and the 7 shaking cups landed on the long stone table. However, the moment they landed, there was no sound. Good, amazing. As expected of the 1,000-hand ailing immortal. Senior Zhong is indeed the gambling immortal of the southern region. The dice cups landed, and there was a flood of praises. Especially the cultivators of the dream capital. They praised him even more. However, Zhong Bufu's set was indeed eye-catching. The 1,000-hand ailing immortal lived up to his name. Little girl, please report your numbers. Zhong Bufu slightly straightened his body, stroking his white goatee, looking very confident. However, the female cultivator took a step forward, her steps calm. First cup, 2136511. Small. The voice of the ghostly figure was naturally pleasant to the ear. The 3 judges watched over everything and did not find anything wrong with either side. Then, He Yunzhong waved his hand, personally opening the cup. 2136511. Small. The number of the 7 dice was exactly the same as the ghostly figure reported. Hua! Instantly, the entire place was filled with thunderous applause. Do Tianlu could not help but nod. That purple-clothed female cultivator was actually this powerful? However, Zhong Bufu only smiled faintly, because he was not surprised that he guessed one correctly. If one could not even guess the number of the dice in one cup, then they were not fit to participate in today's gamble. On the other hand, Sumo's expression was even more indifferent, even somewhat indifferent. At this moment, the numbers of the 7 shaking cups appeared in his mind. When Phantom reported the number, Sumo, who had not opened the cup, knew that everything was correct. Second cup, 1 point, 1 point, 3 points, 4 points, 5 points, 2 points, 2 points. Small. Gui Ying reported the number of the second cup. He Yunzhong didn't say much and waved his hand. Whoosh! The whole place was in an uproar again, because all of them were correct. The third cup, 1 2 3 3 2 2 2 2. Xiao! Gui Ying said again. He actually said Xiao 3 times in a row. He Yunzhong opened the third cup. Whoosh! The cheers this time were even louder than before. That was because the ghostly figure had hit the mark once again. At that moment, Do Tianlu felt a little dizzy, because he definitely did not have that kind of ability. At most, he could listen to the count of 2 cups. 3 cups was impossible. The 3 great cultivators of Qingfu Mountain, He Yunzhong, He Yunxiao, and He Yunsheng, couldn't help but nod. Even Zhong Bufu's eyes flashed with astonishment. This purple-clothed female cultivator was indeed powerful. Ha ha! Ghost Capital's old ghost laughed loudly, feeling proud of himself. The 4th cup, the 5th cup, the 6th cup, the ghostly figure counted 1 cup, and He Yunzhong opened another. Moreover, both of them were getting faster and faster. Everyone present was no longer cheering, because they realized that there was nothing worth cheering about. After the 6th cup was opened, the whole place was silent. All 6 cups had hit the mark without a single mistake. Everyone in the 3 capitals and the cultivators of the chaotic gods' southern region were dumbfounded. How did that purple-clothed female cultivator do it? At this moment, even Zhong Bufu's expression was solemn. That was because he had remembered a point wrongly just now. The 7th cup, the purple-clothed, ghostly figure paused slightly. The whole place was so quiet that only the sound of the wind could be heard. 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Shout! Leopard points? At this moment, Zhong Bufu's face tightened, and he squinted his eyes. Sumo, on the other hand, nodded slightly with a faint smile. Both of them knew that they had gotten it right again. Open! He and Zhang shouted and waved his sleeve. The lid of the 7th cup flew up. Hua! The cultivators who had been silent for a long time suddenly burst into thunderous applause, because the 7 shiny white dice were neatly placed on the stone table. Each of them had 6 points facing up, and they were as red as beans. The ghostly figure counted it right again, and this time, it was exactly the same. Ha ha! Old Ghost was the first to laugh. How is it? Old sickly Ghost, you've met your match. The people of the Dream Capital's expression slightly darkened. Of course, it was still impossible to determine the winner, but the female cultivator, named Ghostly Shadow, displayed strength that was comparable to the 1,000 Hands sickly immortal. Zhong Bufu's expression was not good. Although he still had a chance, he knew that he was the one who shook the cup in the previous round, so he had the initiative. Senior, is it my turn? The ghostly figure asked. Hee, that's right. Zhong Bufu forced a smile and nodded his head. He and Zhang also nodded his head. When they looked again, the ghostly figure did not move at all. However, the 7 shaking cups suddenly flew up, and the 49 dice also fell into the shaking cups like before. Ding, ding, dang, dang. Originally, everyone thought that the female cultivator Ghostly Shadow would act like the 1,000 Hands sickly immortal, shaking the dice cups and dancing up and down like an immortal. However, that did not happen. The 7 cups only moved in the air 3 times up, 3 times down, 3 times left, and 3 times right. The pattern was extremely monotonous. The most important thing was that the ghostly figure did not make any sound when she shook the cups. The shaking of the cups was silent. This ultimate skill instantly shocked everyone present. This was because the majority of people who gambled on the dice relied on sound to distinguish the rolling of the dice, and then calculate the number of dice. However, the ghostly figure shook the cups silently. What should they do? In that instant, Zhong Bufu's expression changed. To be honest, he had never seen such an opponent before. Who, with just a few simple movements, the 7 dice cups landed on the stone table, and again, there was no sound. This time, none of the cultivators present dared to make another move. Senior Zhong, please, the ghostly figure said. Zhong Bufu was momentarily speechless. This was because he did not have any confidence at all. Just now, he had only heard the sound of the dice entering the cup. According to the ghostly figure's hand gestures, he could only make a simple judgment. The first clock, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Big. However, Zhong Bufu was an immortal of gambling after all. After pondering for a moment, he still gave the numbers. Everyone present was waiting for the dice cups to be opened. He and Zhang did not say anything else and directly waved his hand. Open, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Big. Iwu. Sounds of astonishment and disappointment could be heard. This was because no one had expected Zhong Bufu to make a mistake in the first cup. Although he had guessed the size correctly, he had reported the number of dice incorrectly. Hiss! Do Qianlu could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. This was because he already greatly admired Zhong Bufu. If it were him, he would probably not even get the size right, much less the number of dice incorrectly. The moment the dice cups were opened, Zhong Bufu's face turned slightly pale. He could not remember the last time he had lost. 2,000 years ago, or 3,000 years ago. Senior, you have lost this round. The ghostly figure's tone was calm. There's no need to guess the other 6 cups. Zhong Bufu was speechless. Chapter 244. 1,000 Hands, sickly immortal, was defeated in 1 cup. This was a situation that no one present had expected, but had happened. She had guessed wrongly in the first cup, so there was no need to guess the other 6 cups. Zhong Bufu laughed bitterly and cupped his fists at the purple-clothed ghost. Lady, you're amazing. I've lost this round. Zhong Bufu removed the word little from his address. Evidently, he did not dare to underestimate her anymore. However, he did not know what the ghost would bet on for the second round. At this moment, Sumo took 2 steps forward. Sumo looked at Gue Ying and He Yunzhong, cupped his fist slightly, and said, "Since Senior Zhong is no longer guessing, then let's go. Since Senior Zhong has stopped guessing, why don't I try and see if I can guess the remaining 6 cups correctly?" "Sure," the ghost answered. Her answer was straightforward. He Yunzhong hesitated. "Little brother Su, of course you can do that. However, this cannot be considered a bet. No matter if it's right or wrong, it cannot determine the victor between the 2 of you." "Understood." Sumo nodded. At this moment, the people of the 3 cities were discussing. Thousand Hands, sickly immortal, did not guess correctly. Can this nascent soul intermediate stage do it? I don't think so. That purple-clothed female cultivator shook the cup soundlessly, and her movements were simple. It's too abnormal. It's hard to say, since Wangdu City invited him, and he took the initiative to announce the number of points. If he can't, wouldn't he be humiliating himself? Yes, that Sumo might not be famous. While everyone was discussing, the people of the 3 cities were waiting for Sumo to announce the number of points. Although it did not determine the victor, whether Sumo was right or wrong could directly reflect the difference in strength between them. The second cup, 1 point, 2 points, 1 point, 4 points, 3 points, 3 points, 6 points. Small, Sumo said calmly. He and Zhang waved his hand lightly. Open. Wah. Once the cup was opened, everyone applauded. That was because Sumo's results were all accurate. At that moment, the forgotten capital city's elders, Fu Wanxing and Do Tianlu, all smiled. In particular, Fu Wanxing and Do Tianlu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Sumo was recommended by them. If she was too bad, it would be hard for them to explain. At this moment, Sumo had guessed 1 cup correctly. At the very least, this meant that she was not inferior to Zhong Bufu, who was famous for gambling. The purple-robed ghost did not change at all. Zhong Bufu's expression turned even uglier, because it meant that he was actually inferior to the mid-nascent soul stage wombing Sumo in this round. The third cup, 3 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Big. Sumo continued to count, and He Yunzhong continued to open the cup. The third cup was a complete success. At this moment, the scene was a little similar to the situation when Spirit Shadow was counting off, and there was no sound anymore. The 4th cup, the 5th cup, the 6th cup, the 7th cup, Sumo finished reporting 1 by 1. He Yunzhong opened them 1 by 1. Every hit, without a single mistake. Whoosh, whoosh. At that moment, thunderous applause and cheers rang out once again. Especially the people of the forgotten capital city. Their faces lit up with joy. That scene was truly shocking. Everyone felt that it was inconceivable. How did Sumo guess it correctly? The people of Dream Capital City had the ugliest expressions. The thousand-hand, sickly, immortal Zhong lived up to his reputation. In gambling, he could be said to be the #1 gambler in the southern region. But today, he was actually suppressed by 2 nameless people. At this moment, Zhong Bufu's expression was even uglier. He had a premonition that his lifetime of gambling fame was going to be buried today. However, he had already agreed to bet with Dream Capital City, so he had to finish the bet. Fellow Daoist Su, you're amazing. The purple-robed ghost actually commented. Sumo nodded in acknowledgement and did not say anything else. Following which, Sumo took 2 steps back and continued to watch the game. Miss, can you name the second round? Zhong Bufu was anxious to save his face. If he did not win the second round, he was afraid that his reputation as a gambling immortal would be gone. All right. The purple-robed ghost was neither too fast nor too slow. Then, he slowly said, Senior Zhong is known as the gambling immortal. I'm afraid that a normal bet would bring shame to Senior's reputation. Thus, today, I specially prepared a different bet. Senior, please watch. As he spoke, the purple-robed ghost slightly waved his hand. Whoosh, whoosh. The 7 shaking cups just now suddenly flew up. Then, they collided with each other in the void and separated from each other. All of a sudden, the 7 cups separated, each occupying a different position. Then they landed on the ground and sank straight into the ground. In an instant, they disappeared. Then, the 70 to 40 dice flew up as well. Puff, puff, puff. Puff, puff. 7 horizontally and 7 vertically. Horizontally and vertically, they landed on the ground, forming exactly 49 dots. Each of the dice had a dot pointing up, which was quite beautiful. The Go's series of actions were unfathomable. What was he betting on? However, Zhong Bufu was after all experienced and knowledgeable. From the beginning of the ghost's first action, he had been staring at the ghost's actions, as well as the 7 dice cups and the trajectory of the dice. A true gambler would coordinate his hands, eyes, heart, ears, and will, and finally luck. Only then could he guess the winning bet. One had to admit that Zhong Bufu was top-notch in every aspect. However, he definitely did not have any luck today. Otherwise, he would not have met these 2 special people today. Everyone present looked on in a daze. The dice landed on the ground, as if they were rooted to the ground, and did not move at all. Only then did the ghost speak. Senior Zhong, this is my bet. Just now, I hid the 7 dice cups in the ground. They are under these 40 dice. As long as Senior can point them out one by one, it will be considered Senior's victory. If there is one less, it will be Junior's victory. Once the ghost said this, everyone present could not help but frown, because this bet seemed to be too simple. 7 by 7, 49 positions to find the 7 dice cups. The probability seemed very high. Do Tianlu furrowed his brows. Even though he had taken a look just now, he seemed to be able to point out the positions of the 3 dice cups. Moreover, the 1,000-hand, sickly, immortal Zhong Bufu. At this moment, Sumo smiled coldly, because he knew that everything was not as simple as it seemed. This bet would become more and more difficult as it progressed. However, even so, it was still a form of confusion. The real place was not here, and Zhong Bufu had already fallen into the trap. Oh! At this moment, Zhong Bufu's eyes narrowed. Of course, he did not believe that the ghost would set such a simple bet for him. Having gambled for thousands of years, Zhong Bufu naturally understood that the simpler the bet, the deeper the trap. Miss, do you know the rules of the bet? Zhong Bufu asked. Senior, don't worry. Of course I know the rules. The moment the dice land on the ground, the bet is set. I will not do anything else. Everyone present can all be witnesses. Gu Ying said, if I go against the rules, I will admit defeat. Zhong Bufu then looked at the He brothers. Don't worry, Taoist Zhong. We brothers will definitely be fair. If there is even the slightest bit of injustice, we will take responsibility. He and Zhong said, all right. Zhong Bufu nodded. This time, he was extremely cautious, because he could not afford to fail. However, Zhong Bufu did not immediately point out the dice cup onto the dice. Instead, he slowly walked 3 rounds around the 40-odd dice. At this moment, many cultivators present were somewhat anxious. This was because they felt that there was definitely a dice cup under the dice. They did not understand why Zhong Bufu was hesitating. Chapter 245. Illusion. Zhong Bufu's heart shook. After all, adding illusions to bets was something that was recognized in the chaotic gods continent. However, it had been a long time since he had encountered such a gamble. Firstly, there were very few cultivators who could set up illusion techniques in the gambling house. Secondly, there were very few who could use illusion techniques in front of Zhong Bufu. He, Zhong Bufu, could see through ordinary illusions with a glance. They were completely ineffective. However, today's wager had caused Zhong Bufu's world to spin. Ding, ding, dang, dang. Ding, ding, dang, dang, dang. Zhong Bufu circled the area 3 times, but his thoughts were still unclear. Instead, the sound of the dice cups colliding echoed in his mind. At the same time, countless red dots swayed in front of his eyes. The 49 red dots were like red stars that filled the sky, shining brightly. Zhong Bufu cursed inwardly. He already understood. It turned out that when Gu Ying raised the dice cup, he had already lured him into the game. Phantom knew that he was in a hurry to win and would definitely pay attention to his every move. At that moment, he had already laid down an illusion. The more Zhong Bufu clung to the bet, the more he couldn't see things clearly. All of this was within Gue Ying's calculations. However, as expected of the gambling immortal, Zhong Bufu immediately adjusted his state of mind. Zhong Bufu closed his eyes. He looked like he was in deep thought, but in reality, he was chanting a calming technique to get rid of the interference of the illusion. After a long while, the clanking sounds finally disappeared. The countless red dots finally turned into 49. Amazing, Zhong Bufu thought to himself. At this moment, he had almost no confidence in identifying the 7 dice cups. However, he still relied on his own experience and concentrated for a moment to determine Qi Gu's position. Then, Zhong Bufu tapped the first die on the northeast corner. A ray of white light shot out from his fingertip and hit the red heart of the die. Many of the cultivators there frowned. Do Tianlu of Forgotten Capital City was one of them, because he had seen it clearly just now. There was definitely no dice cup under the first die in the northeast corner. Of all the people present, only Su Mo nodded slightly. This was because there was indeed a dice cup hidden under the dice. Fellow Taoist, please verify it, Zhong Bufu said slowly. All right, He Yunzhang pointed with one hand. The die flew up, and a red light appeared in He Yunzhang's hand. Chi chi chi, the red light drilled into the ground, reaching 3 feet in an instant. However, there was nothing under the dice. There was no dice cup at all. Almost everyone present let out a sigh of regret at the same time. This was because none of them understood why Zhong Bufu would choose to stand under a dice cup that could not possibly have a dice cup. AI. Do Tianlu let out a long sigh. However, Zhong Bufu and Sumo were the most shocked at that moment. The two of them couldn't help but look at each other. They saw each other's shock, because both of them believed that there should be a dice cup under the dice. Then, Zhong Bufu's face turned pale. He turned to look at He Yunzhang and said, Taoist, you were monitoring everything just now. Are there no abnormalities? Huh? He Yunzhang was startled by Zhong Bufu's question and couldn't help but turn to look at his 2 younger brothers. He Yunxiao and He Yunsheng raised their eyebrows. Taoist Zhong, what do you mean? Do you not trust our Qingfu mountain? He Yunsheng said unhappily. Everything was normal just now. There was no problem at all. Zhong Bufu laughed bitterly and cupped his fists at Madame He. Since that's the case, I apologize for being rude. With that, Zhong Bufu sighed at Guiying. I've dominated the gambling scene for thousands of years. My horizons have been broadened today. If I'm not wrong, you used the flower grafting tree, pursuing shadow technique that have been lost for tens of thousands of years. Am I right? Senior Zhong is indeed knowledgeable. Guiying nodded. Flower grafting tree, pursuing shadow? What technique was that? Everyone present, including Sumo, had never heard of it before. However, from Zhong Bufu's words, one could tell that it was a gambling technique. Zhong Bufu shook his head in self-mockery. Flower grafting tree, pursuing shadow. To lose to this technique, this old man is sincerely convinced and has no regrets. However, I have a request. I wonder if you can reveal your true appearance and let me see you? Senior Zhong, I cannot comply. The purple-robed figure said calmly. If you want to see my true appearance, you must defeat me. Zhong Bufu nodded and said self-mockingly. If I could defeat the flower grafting tree technique, I would have left the chaotic gods continent a long time ago. With that, Zhong Bufu cupped his fists at the dream capital's great elder Yujiqing. Taoist you, I have failed you. I am truly sorry. Then he cupped his fists at the surrounding chaotic gods continent cultivators. Everyone, I, Zhong Bufu, am known as the gambling immortal. However, I'm not as good as you today, and I accept my defeat. Today I, Zhong Bufu, announce that I will retire from gambling. From now on, the chaotic gods continent will only be poor and sickly people, not the gambling immortal. I shall take my leave. After saying that, Zhong Bufu's body turned slightly, and he disappeared. Wah! The crowd was in an uproar. Actually, the moment Zhong Bufu appeared, Many people thought that this gamble had lost its meaning. After all, Zhong Bufu was the gambling immortal. However, the previous 2 rounds had shocked everyone and left them in disbelief. This was because Zhong Bufu had lost, and he had lost miserably. From now on, the chaotic gods continent would only be poor and sickly people, not the gambling immortal. Today's gamble had forced Zhong Bufu to retire. This was something that no one had expected. Everyone's faces were filled with astonishment. Who exactly was that ghostly figure? The Mingdu's side did not expect such an outcome. Before this, they had thought that this gamble was in the bag. In order to persuade Zhong Bufu, they had expended a lot of resources. However, it had been to no avail. Yu Jiqing sighed deeply. He had a good relationship with Zhong Bufu, and he understood Zhong Bufu's temperament very well. If there was even the slightest chance of winning, Zhong Bufu would not have acted this way. Retire from gambling. Zhong Bufu did not even bother competing with sumo because he knew that it was meaningless. The appearance of the purple-robed, ghostly figure was a crushing existence. Haha! At this moment, the happiest person was none other than the ghost capital's old ghost. The old man laughed heartily without any scruples. He actually said to Sumo, "Little brother Su, I wonder if you still want to compete?" Since Zhong Bufu had admitted defeat and left, he felt that there was no need for Sumo to compete. In fact, this was also the thought of a portion of the cultivators present. Although Sumo had shown his skills earlier, no one was optimistic about him. Hee, why not? Sumo looked at Old Ghost and sneered. "Senior, are you afraid?" "I'm afraid." Old Ghost could not help but sneer when he heard Sumo's unfriendly tone. "Little brother Su, my ghost city has never been afraid of anything." "Is that so?" Sumo stared at Old Ghost and smiled. "In that case, I have a new request." "Is Ghost City afraid?" "What request?" Old Ghost asked. "Raise the stakes." Sumo's words were powerful. Chapter 246. Additional Stakes. Once Sumo's words left her mouth, everyone was shocked. Was this green-clothed nascent soul, intermediate stage, crazy? Even 1,000-hand ailing immortal Zhong Bufu lost and retired from gambling. That purple-clothed, ghostly figure displayed his overwhelming ability. At this moment, Sumo actually requested for additional stakes. At that moment, even the people of Wangdu City could not understand it. The elders of Wangdu City could not help but look at Great Elder Zhuge Hong. And that Great Elder Zhuge Hong displayed the demeanor of a great elder at this moment. Zhuge Hong's expression was calm, and there was nothing out of the ordinary. He did not even respond to the gazes of the other elders, but faced everything in the field calmly. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu exchanged glances. 1. They were worried that Sumo would say something crazy, and 2. They admired Great Elder's steadiness. At this moment, no one knew that Zhuge Hong's heart was in turmoil, and he had started to curse. Additional stakes? Sumo, you're F***king insane. What additional stakes? We just need to keep the 20% of the mineral resources. Of course, Zhuge Hong only cursed in his heart, but on the surface, he was extremely calm. At this moment, he displayed the skills of a spirit transformation full circle. Additional stakes? Old Ghost was stunned. However, he immediately looked at the people of Wangdu City, and from their expressions, he immediately determined that this was an impromptu idea. However, Zhuge Hong's calm and collected demeanor made him a little suspicious. Additional stakes? How? Old Ghost sneered. If I win, Wangdu City wants 50% of the mineral resources. Sumo looked at Old Ghost. Whoosh! In an instant, the entire field almost exploded. Just now, in order to appear calm and cover up his nervousness, Zhuge Hong picked up a cup of tea and took a sip. Puff! Once he heard Sumo's words, he actually spurted out the tea. Cough, cough! Zhuge Hong immediately realized that he had lost his composure. This tea, it's too hot, too hot. Hee. A spirit transformation full circle said that a cup of tea that had been cold for almost 2 hours was too hot. Who was he trying to fool? Ha ha ha. Hearing Sumo's words, Old Ghost actually looked up to the sky and laughed. Sumo, are you crazy? Let's not talk about the fact that you might not win the bet. Even if you win, you can ask the Forgotten Capital City if they dare to ask for 50% of this, or... Old Ghost's words were filled with threats, because this was indeed the case. Forgotten Capital City was the weakest of the three cities. There was not a single deity tribulation cultivator in Forgotten Capital City. Originally, they had only asked for 20%. If they were given 50%, they might not be able to defend it. Elder Gui, since I, Sumo, dare to bet, Wangdu City naturally dares to win. Sumo smiled. Huh. At this time, the great elder of the dream capital, Yu Jiqing, also sneered. Sumo's bet was equivalent to snatching the shares of Ghost Capital and Dream Capital. What if you can't win? Old Ghost coldly asked. If we can't win, of course Forgotten Capital City doesn't want 10%. This or can be divided between the two cities. Forget Capital City will back out. Sumo's words were resolute and decisive. Sumo, do you think you could be the ruler of Wangdu City? Old Ghost looked at Sumo with disdain, then looked at the elders of Wangdu City. At this time, the elders of Wangdu City all had different expressions. Only Zhuge Hong regained his composure. With one hand holding the teacup and the other holding the lid, he gently blew on the cold tea with a faint smile on his face. The highest realm of acting tough was nothing more than this. Cough, cough. Great elder, great elder. Jean Mantang, who was beside him, reminded. Oh, what's the matter? Zhuge Hong acted as if he was suddenly enlightened, as if all his attention was on drinking tea. This caused the surrounding people to be speechless. Great elder, Sumo wants to increase the bet. If he wins, we will get 50% of the ore. However, if he loses, we will back out and no longer want the ore. Jean Mandang could only repeat himself. Oh, Zhuge Hong nodded lightly. Brother Su, please make the decision for such a small matter. Everything will be decided by Brother Su. Such a small matter? Huh. The people of Wangdu City all felt that their great elder's act was a little too much. 10% to 20% of the supreme spiritual stone mine was enough for Wangdu City to consume for thousands of years. This was a small matter? Then Wangdu City would probably have nothing to worry about. This time, he had given Su Mo enough face. But in reality, Zhuge Hong had already thought everything through. This was because if Sumo lost, Wangdu City would at most get 10% of the ore. If Sumo won, Wangdu City would get 50% of the ore. Comparing, it wasn't hard to make a decision. Although it was risky, what wasn't risky? In the infinite worlds, there was almost no such thing as profit without risk. This time, Zhuge Hong had placed all his bets on Su Mo. As for confidence, he didn't have it. However, this was a gamble. At the same time, Zhuge Hong faintly felt that Sumo wasn't a normal intermediate nascent soul. Because a normal intermediate nascent soul wouldn't dare to raise the stakes at this time, unless he didn't want to live anymore. One must know that if Sumo won, he would have Wangdu City support. But if he lost, could he guarantee that Wangdu City would let him go? If he really was an intermediate nascent soul, there were hundreds and thousands of people in Wangdu City who could kill him. So, there was only one conclusion. No matter who won or lost, Sumo wasn't afraid. And how could someone who wasn't afraid of Wangdu City and Wangdu City casually raise the stakes? So, Sumo's victory was definitely a high probability event. These thoughts were all within Zhuge Hong's consideration. He looked casual, but he had already weighed everything. Hearing Zhuge Hong's words, Old Ghost laughed coldly. Old Ghost had always been cunning and proud of his intelligence. Everything that happened just now was seen by him. He mistakenly thought that everything was discussed before by Wangdu City. Zhuge Hong and the other elders were just putting on an act, trying to deceive him. Wangdu City was ambitious. But this Sumo was just an intermediate nascent soul cultivator. Did she really have the ability to win against Guiying? At this moment, Sumo looked at Zhuge Hong and praised him in her heart. It seemed like Zhuge Hong was not ordinary to be able to become the great elder of Wangdu City. Zhuge Hong's support for Sumo was very important. Senior old ghost. Then can you be the master of Wangdu and Mingdu? Sumo countered. Huh? Old ghost hesitated. He actually looked at Gue Ying. If I win, Wangdu City and Mengdu will get 640. If I lose, Wangdu City and Mengdu will get 320. How about that? Gue Ying's words were directed at Yu Jiqing of Mengdu City. It was obvious that he agreed to Sumo's bet. Yu Jiqing laughed helplessly. Now, Zhong Bufu had already backed out. He could only choose to agree. Mengdu City no longer had the initiative. Sure, Yu Jiqing nodded. I hope that Lady Gue Ying wins. Whoosh! The spectating chaotic gods cultivators were in an uproar again. Bet. This time, the gambling became even more exciting. Chapter 247. The three cities came to an agreement. At this moment, Sumo smiled at the He brothers of Green Fushan Mountain. Seniors, I'll have to trouble you to bear witness later. The He brothers nodded slightly. In the end, they actually raised the stakes. The stakes weren't small at all. They did not expect this. However, there was no problem if the three sides agreed. Miss, how do we bet? Sumo asked Phantom Shadow. Same rule, one person per round. If it's a draw, we'll add another round and discuss the rules. How about it? Phantom Shadow said. As you say, miss, Sumo replied. Miss, please make the first bet. The bet is here. There's no need to make another bet. Phantom Shadow said. Just now, Senior Zhong only guessed once and missed. There are 48 dice left. Fellow Daoist Su, if you can find the 7 dice cups. You won this round. Once Phantom Shadow said this, the crowd began to discuss again. There's still a need for this round? Sigh. Looks like that flower grafting tree, shadow following, won't be easy to break. Otherwise, why would we use the old game? Of course it won't be easy. Can it force the 1,000-hand ailing immortal away? I think that Sumo is in trouble. The cultivators in chaotic god domain discussed. Most of them were not optimistic about Sumo. The cultivators in Ghost Capital and Dream Capital, however, were full of confidence. The cultivators in Forgotten Capital, on the other hand, looked nervous. Sumo laughed. Miss, this round doesn't have an illusion. Aren't you at a disadvantage? Illusion? The cultivators present were shocked. So there was an illusion hidden in that seemingly normal bet? No wonder Zhong Bufu fell just now. A bet is a bet on luck. How can a mere illusion decide everything? Fellow Daoist Su, try to break this round. Don't worry, Phantom Shadow said. Sumo laughed, but she did not agree to the bet immediately. Sumo walked closer to the bet. At this moment, only one dice in the northeast corner was dug 3 feet deep. The other dice did not move at all. Sumo frowned slightly. Although he and Zhongbu Fu had determined that there was a dice cup in the northeast corner, it was fortunate that Zhongbu Fu was the one who gambled, not Sumo. This was tantamount to Su Mo having a chance to correct himself. The first mistake was definitely due to the wrong method of calculation. Therefore, this time, Sumo reevaluated everything. Furthermore, Zhong Bufu's failure just now had given Su Mo the best example and inspiration. In fact, Sumo was certain that the moment Zhong Buying hit the die in the northeast corner, a figure suddenly appeared. There was a dice cup under the dice. However, the moment he raised the dice cup, the position of the cup changed. All of this was reflected in Sumo's spiritual platform. However, Sumo was sure that it wasn't Phantom's doing or Yunzhang's doing. Instead, it was the dice cup's automatic movement. This was completely in line with the rules of the bet. At that moment, Sumo recalled that before setting up the bet, Phantom had raised the dice cup and collided it with each other. It seemed like that process wasn't just part of the illusion. It was also the key to the later part of the bet. All the dice cups used that collision to establish a connection with each other. Therefore, to be precise, what Phantom had set up was no longer a simple bet. Instead, it was a mysterious formation. It was like a shadow following a flower on a tree. If Zhongbu Fu missed the position of the dice cup, it would be fine. However, if he did, the moment the dice cup was opened, the dice cup that he had guessed would move to the position of the other dice cup. Meanwhile, the 7 dice cups were still moving around. Therefore, this was a bet that could not be guessed correctly. An illusion that was set up in a bet contained a formation. Sumo's interest in the purple-clothed phantom increased. This mysterious woman was very powerful. If Sumo wasn't a deity tribulation cultivator and didn't have many inheritances of the Windwheel lineage, she wouldn't have been able to see through all this. Since she had seen through it, Sumo naturally had a way to solve it. However, Sumo had to make a request. Since Miss has said so, then we'll use this bet as a bet. However, I have a request. I hope Senior he can forgive me. Sumo looked at He Yunzhang and said, "Oh." He Yunzhang smiled. "Brother Su, what is it that you need my forgiveness for? I want to open the cup myself." Sumo said, "Eh?" He Yunzhang frowned. "Brother Su, do you not trust me?" Sumo bowed. "Senior He, please don't blame me. It's not that I don't trust you, but the key to winning this bet lies in the opening of the cup. I have to open the cup myself to determine the winner. Therefore, please forgive me, Senior, and please supervise me." Sumo wouldn't dare to cheat. Sumo's attitude was very sincere. Hearing this, He Yunzhang nodded. "Good. Then, brother, Su will open the cup yourself. However, if you break the rules, I'll deal with it fairly." "Thank you, Senior." Sumo smiled. Then, he said to the phantom, "Miss, I'm afraid I'll have the honor of seeing your true appearance today." "Not necessarily," the phantom said calmly. Sumo smiled but didn't say anything. Then, Sumo turned around and faced the bet with narrowed eyes. To be honest, this bet was definitely not easy to win. Otherwise, he wouldn't have forced Zhong Bufu to retreat. Even if Sumo could see through the bet, he still needed the ability to solve it. Sumo was very cautious, because once he lost a round, it would be even more difficult to win it back. He looked at the bet for a long time. The entire place was silent. Since Sumo wanted to open the cup herself, then the result would be clear when he made his move. Therefore, everyone was waiting for Sumo to make her move. The ghostly figure was dressed in a purple robe and stood quietly not far away. The wind seemed to be unable to move her purple robe. She was like a lifeless statue. Looking at Sumo, he stared at her for a long time. Suddenly, the corners of his mouth curled up. At that moment, the positions of the 7 dice cups were all in his mind. The hardest part of this round was actually opening the cup. If it were anyone else, they might not be able to open the cup. However, Sumo was different. Looking again, Sumo formed a seal with both hands. Her fingertips emitted wisps of light. "Everyone, close your eyes. Sumo, it's time to pull out the radish." Sumo joked. Although she was joking, Sumo's hands did not slow down. Suddenly, 7 rays of light shot out from Sumo's fingertips. The 7 rays of light shot toward the 7 dice on the ground like silk threads. 7 dice cups opened at the same time. The spectating cultivators did not expect Sumo to open the cup like that. They could not help but be slightly stunned. At that moment, the 7 dice cups were in different positions in the minds of the cultivators. No one knew if Sumo's choice was correct. They could only wait and see. Whoosh, whoosh. Looking again, Sumo really looked like she was pulling out a radish. The 7 dice flew up, and the 7 dice cups followed suit. Everything happened in an instant. Sumo's speed was too fast. Not a single mistake. Ding, ding, dang, dang. The dice cups actually collided in the air. This was because Sumo's speed was too fast. It was a kind of inertia of the formation. The key to breaking the bet was to open the cups at the same time and not give them a chance to connect. If the 7 cups were opened at the same time, none of them would be able to escape. Good, good. The cultivators of Forgotten Capital City cheered. The cultivators of Chaotic God State also applauded. This scene was too exciting, especially the bet that even Zhong Bufu could not break. It made Sumo even more extraordinary. The body of the ghostly figure under the purple robe slightly shook. White bone skeleton technique. She did not expect Sumo to know a puppet technique. One should know that the only technique that could break her flower grafting technique was the white bone skeleton technique. Who are you? Chapter 248. Sumo broke the game. It was absolutely shocking. The 7 dice cups came out of the ground at the same time and collided in the air. For a moment, a cacophony of clinking sounds could be heard. That scene caused many cultivators in the chaotic god's realm to clap and cheer. Sumo actually won the game that the thousand-hand, sickly immortal could not win. The cultivators of the Ghost Capital and the Dream Capital looked at Sumo with hostility, especially the cultivators of the Ghost Capital. Their eyes were filled with hostility when they looked at Sumo. Although the old ghost looked calm on the surface, he did not expect the spirit shadow to lose. Deep in the old ghost's eyes, there was a hint of resentment. The people of the Ghost Capital had always been arrogant. After losing this game, their hearts were filled with anger. However, the rules were there, so they could not say anything. However, the atmosphere in the arena became even more tense. The purple-robed spirit shadow did not expect Sumo to break the game. In fact, when Sumo asked to open the dice cup herself, she was still confident that she would win. Because even if Sumo saw through her game, she was not afraid. Opening the dice cup at the same time was the only way to break the game. Most importantly, opening the dice cup at the same time required a special hand. Otherwise, her dice cup would automatically swim on the ground. The spirit shadow believed that no one in the chaotic god's continent could do that. However, Sumo did it, and it was clean and neat. White bone skeleton technique. That was a top-notch puppet technique. Who are you? The spirit shadow seemed to raise her head slightly. Her voice was slightly cold. However, she still did not reveal her true face. I am Sumo, a rogue cultivator. Sumo replied, and at the same time asked, and who are you? I am a spirit shadow, a dissolute gambler. The spirit shadow's voice was calmer. The conversation between the two was very interesting. In fact, both of them knew that the other was not telling the truth. However, neither of them could ask again. That sentence was just to show that they did not believe her. Hee hee. Sumo looked at the spirit shadow and smiled faintly. At this time, Sumo still could not see the spirit shadow clearly. However, she felt that the aura emitted by the spirit shadow was extremely strange. What kind of person was hiding under the purple robe? I've lost this round. Fellow Taoist Sue, please come out with the second wager. Spirit Shadow said. Her voice began to carry traces of coldness, or perhaps hostility. Sumo, on the other hand, looked calm, because the slight change in Spirit Shadow's voice indicated that there was a fluctuation in her heart. This was definitely a good thing for Sumo. It was a taboo for gamblers to have their emotions fluctuate. Okay, Sumo replied. Sumo already had a plan for the second round. Sumo naturally didn't want to gamble on simple games like dice. At this moment, this so-called gamble was no longer a simple gamble. It had evolved into a contest of comprehensive strength. At this moment, everyone present was curious about what kind of bet Sumo would make. Sumo had won a round. At this moment, no one in the arena looked down on him, because Sumo's two breakthroughs were enough to prove her strength. Everyone was thinking, if Spirit Shadow's first opponent wasn't Zhong Bufu, but Sumo, then Spirit Shadow would have already been defeated. When they looked again, Sumo separated her hands, and the aura of her nascent soul dispersed. In the arena, all the 9 dice cups that had been prepared were taken out by Sumo. At the same time, 81 dice flew up. Whoosh! Behind each dice cup were 9 dice. They looked like a dragon's head dragging a dragon's body and tail. The gamble set by Spirit Shadow had already been swept away by Sumo. The dice cups and dice shuttled through the air like dragons, dancing up and down. The cultivators present were dazzled. However, they didn't know what Sumo was going to do. At this moment, Sumo lightly shouted. She pressed her hands down and formed a seal at the same time. Whoosh! Chi-chi! When they looked again, the 9 dice cups each occupied a position and landed on the ground. They formed a circle with a radius of 30 feet between them. As for the 81 dice, they landed inside the circle. They seemed to be scattered, but they were actually arranged in a spiral, containing endless nomological laws. That circle landed right between Sumo and Spirit Shadow. If the two of them were connected, they would pass through the center of the circle. That was definitely not a coincidence. Instead, Sumo had already calculated it when she set it up. Huh. The cultivators watching the battle frowned. What kind of gamble was this? At that moment, the corners of Spirit Shadow's clothes fluttered slightly. "Miss!" Sumo finished her setup, then looked at Spirit Shadow with her hands behind her back and said, "This gamble is that if you can enter my circle from where you are standing, you will win. Under the condition that no dice or dice cups are broken, if Miss can walk to my side, it will be your victory." Huh? When Sumo finished speaking, many people were stunned. Was this a gamble? Sumo, how can this be considered a gamble? This is clearly a formation. Ghost Metropolis's Old Ghost questioned. Hee hee. Sumo turned to look at Old Ghost and sneered. Senior Ghost, why is my game not a gamble? Just now, Ghost Metropolis's game was to choose 7 dice cups. My game is to choose the right route. What's wrong with that? Could it be that even ghosts don't dare to accept the challenge? Huh. Old Ghost glared, wanting to be unreasonable and use this as a pretext to make a fuss. However, the He brothers of Qingfu Mountain nodded in agreement. Fellow Taoist Old Ghost, what little brother Su said makes sense. Since each side has a game, then how to arrange the gambling is the other side's business. Ghost Metropolis's gambling, the other 2 cities did not raise any doubts. Therefore, we think this game is reasonable. The notary spoke, and the cultivators outside the arena nodded repeatedly. That Old Ghost was about to say something. However, Spirit Shadow had already spoken. Old Ghost, you don't have to say anything more. I accept the challenge. Old Ghost. That purple-clothed Spirit Shadow actually directly called Old Ghost as Old Ghost, which was something that the cultivators present did not expect. Other than Zhuge Hong, Yu Jiqing, and the He brothers and other people of the same level, who would dare to call Old Ghost by his name? Yes. When Old Ghost heard this, he actually did not have the slightest bit of anger. Instead, he hurriedly nodded and said yes, and then no longer spoke. It seemed that Spirit Shadow's background was absolutely not ordinary. The great elder of Ghost City, the domineering Old Ghost, actually followed his lead. Sumo was even more interested in this purple-clothed female cultivator. Hee hee. Good, miss. Please break the game. Sumo stood in the same place without moving, quietly looking at Spirit Shadow. And Spirit Shadow did not immediately enter the dice cup, but stood opposite of Sumo, similarly quietly looking at the circle. Everyone understood that this was already a gambling array. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu of Forgotten Capital couldn't help but look at each other. At this time, they already understood in their hearts that Sumo was not a simple middle nascent soul stage. She knew a little about refining weapons and elixirs, and now she had even laid out a strange array. This Sumo was definitely an otherworldly expert, and she was well-versed in everything. Their forgotten capital city could be considered to have met with the help of a benefactor this time. The other cultivators of forgotten capital city also had their confidence boosted. That great elder Zhuge Hong even leisurely picked up the teacup and carefully tasted that cup of cold tea. Chapter 249. The path of array formations was full of variations and was broad and profound. Between the infinite worlds, there were all sorts of strange and wondrous arrays. Sumo's dice and dice cup array was actually derived from an ancient array. It came from 7th Senior Sister's inheritance. Many of those inheritances did not even belong to the Pure Lands. However, Sumo was not certain that she would be able to defeat the ghostly shadow in this round. In truth, every step of an array formation was extremely important. The first step was even more so. Moreover, Sumo's array formation was essentially a maze array. Therefore, the ghostly shadow's first step was very cautious. As she took the first step, everyone's eyes were glued to her. Sumo couldn't help but nod, because there were a total of 36 ways to take the first step, but the ghostly shadow's first step was very correct. She chose the position of the die on the west side of the circle. To the cultivators outside the array formation, the ghostly shadow only took a light leap, and it seemed a bit unnecessary. However, in an instant, the cultivators outside the array formation were in an uproar. Whoosh, because the ghostly shadow disappeared in an instant. However, There were no idiots among the cultivators watching today. Everyone knew that the ghostly shadow had entered the array and that the maze array of the dice cup was not easy to break. Sumo, on the other hand, stood in his position, not moving at all. However, everything that happened in the array formation was in her eyes. Sumo could see it clearly. In an instant, the ghostly shadow had moved 3 times. All 3 times, her position was accurate without the slightest error. Sumo couldn't help but praise her, because being able to take 3 steps in her array formation was already very impressive. Chi-Chi, although the cultivators outside the array formation could not see the ghostly shadow, they could see that the dice inside the array formation were emitting a 3-foot-long red light. Buzz! The 9 dice cups were also humming softly. All of this indicated that the array formation was about to undergo various changes. The cultivators of the 3 capitals and the cultivators of the chaotic soul realm all looked at Sumo in a new light. Whoosh! The purple shadow appeared again. At this time, the ghostly shadow was standing in the center of the circle. In other words, the ghostly shadow had completed half of the array formation. At that moment, an hour had already passed since this trap was set up. The distance of 3 zhong actually took an hour. Those who did not understand would not be able to understand. However, at this moment, the entire place was silent. All the cultivators understood that ghastly shadow's every step must have been carefully calculated. Otherwise, a single misstep could cause the entire game to be lost. Sumo's maze would definitely not give Spirit Shadow the chance to turn back. At this moment, Gue Ying, who was standing in the middle of the array, was even more shocked. She had never imagined that Sumo's maze, which he had set up using only ordinary dice and dice cups, would be so powerful. If the array formation in front of him did not destroy the dice and dice cups, it could trap a perfected soul transformation realm cultivator. In this array, if Sumo had used a magical treasure or a command flag to set up the array with her current appearance, Gue Ying knew in his heart that she would most likely not be able to pass through this array, unless she shattered the dice, but that would be against the rules. This maze formation was unpredictable. With every step the ghostly figure took, and even with every turn, the scene in front of him changed. It could be said that every step was a scene, and at the same time, a trap. Gue Ying understood that as long as he took a wrong step, he would not have a chance. Ooh, is this Sumo in green? Just as Sumo was curious about Gue Ying was even more curious about Sumo. That white bone skeleton technique was enough to make Gue Ying endlessly interested in Sumo. At this moment, Gue Ying stood in the middle of the circle. From her point of view, there was a tall mountain in front of her, and she could not see the mountain path. Behind her was an endless cliff, and there was no way out. Of course, Gue Ying understood that it was an illusion. In fact, the entire maze was an illusion, but as long as you walked in the right direction, all the illusions would disappear. Gue Ying calmed his mind and concentrated, and then gently moved to the left. That was not forward, but to the left and back. At that moment, many cultivators outside the field saw Gue Ying's step. Some of the cultivators were puzzled, while others who were proficient in array formations thought so. Because, in the array formation, it was often a step back to see the world. This also contained the truth of life. When Sumo saw Gue Ying's step, she nodded slightly again. This step back indicated that Gue Ying had safely walked through half of the array formation. This Gue Ying is really powerful, Sumo thought to herself. If this array formation of his was placed on the white bone continent, he estimated that only by Lai would be able to walk out of it. Whoosh! Inside the array, the scenery in front of Gue Ying changed. The tall mountain disappeared, the deep cliff disappeared, and it was really a vast world. A golden ocean with endless waves. On the ocean, there were countless lotus flowers. Each of them had straight roots, without branches, and the lotuses were as big as umbrellas. They were crystal clear, and their fragrance filled the air. On the other side of the ocean, there was actually a white mountain, and immortal energy lingered. Gue Ying clearly knew that it was an illusion, but he could not help but be startled, because that scenery was really beautiful. At the same time, Gui Ying's heart moved. That Sumo could actually create such an illusion. Golden Ocean, Immortal Lotus, White Mountain. That was the reincarnation saint realm. Many cultivators would not be able to see it in their entire lives. However, Guiying was not sure if that was intentional by Sumo, or if she had accidentally created such a miraculous scene. Could it be that Sumo had seen such a miraculous scene before? Impossible. Guiying immediately denied himself. Sigh. Guiying sighed softly. She really did not want that saint realm to disappear. It would be good to watch it for a while, but she could not. This round, she must win. At the same time, she had already thought of what to bet for the third round. She wanted to see how capable Sumo was. Thus, Guiying waved her purple sleeves and directly rushed towards the golden ocean in the illusion. Poof! She lightly tapped with one foot, landed on a lotus, and then lightly leaped and rushed towards another lotus. Outside the array, in the eyes of other cultivators, Guiying had already disappeared. But in Sumo's eyes, everything was still vivid in her mind. Crossing the sea by stepping on lotus. At that moment, Sumo thought of the peerlessly beautiful man in Mu Jinghong's ancient painting. He had once said that he could cross the sea by stepping on lotus and go straight to the White Mountain. Although that sea was only an illusion created by Sumo, that illusion was indeed inspired by Mu Jinghong's ancient painting. Guiying's purple robe fluttered like auspicious clouds. Every step, there was not the slightest mistake. This journey required a total of 7 steps. Her purple robe fluttered like a butterfly. At that moment, Sumo was a little absent-minded, because he felt that Guiying's posture was extremely similar to Mu Jinghong. But he knew that it was not Mu Jinghong. Whoosh! Guiying's 7th step finally landed on the lotus, and the illusion in front of her suddenly disappeared. At that moment, she was still standing inside the array, but she was only 3 steps away from Sumo. At that moment, the expressions of the people of Guiying and Meng Du eased slightly, but the people of Wang Du looked nervous. Would victory and defeat be decided in 3 steps? Would there be more waves? Chapter 250. 3 steps, only 3 steps. That was the last 3 steps between the ghostly shadow and Sumo. Sumo naturally did not move, and the ghostly shadow did not move immediately either. At this time, there was a dice cup and 13 dice between them. All the cultivators watched quietly. Except for the sound of the wind, there's almost no sound inside or outside the field. At that moment, everyone stared unblinkingly, feeling quite nervous. Whoosh! The ghostly shadow finally moved. Inside the array, in the eyes of the ghostly shadow, there was a vast star field. Countless stars lit up and were annihilated. There were many clusters of stars in the distance, but it was unknown how many stars there were. Some clusters of stars were like mountains, some clusters of stars were like ancient ships, and some clusters of stars were gradually drifting away. How many lives were being reincarnated? The ghostly shadow frowned in his heart. Why were the illusions created by Sumo so bizarre? Previously, there was the reincarnation realm. Now, there was the star map of the worlds. Those scenes were definitely not something that an ordinary cultivator could see or create, because they simply could not have that kind of perspective. That was the perspective of a god. The ghostly shadow did not believe that these illusions were created by Sumo out of thin air, because that was simply impossible. It was like a person who had never seen snowflakes and could not imagine the magnificence of the snowfall. Sumo? Sumo. The ghostly shadow muttered Sumo's name in his heart. Then, the ghostly shadow twisted his body and flew straight into the depths of the Sea of Stars. The Sea of Stars was endless, like a vast ocean. The ghostly shadow's posture was like a Jingwei bird. That move seemed to be meaningless. However, the moment the ghostly shadow entered the Sea of Stars, the scene in front of her changed. The ghostly shadow landed on a place that looked like an island. Boom! Boom! In the depths of the sea of stars, a cluster of stars suddenly exploded. All kinds of splendor, like shooting stars. That big explosion changed the layout of the entire star field. Countless mysterious lights went straight to the ghostly shadow. Those lights seemed to have the power to tear the stars apart. The ghostly shadow knew that everything was an illusion. However, at that moment, she actually felt a kind of tearing and pain. Sumo's attainment in arrays had reached this level. Who? A beam of white light flew out of the myriad of profound lights. The white light illuminated the world, and its shape resembled a giant skeleton. His back was like a crescent moon as he flew deep into the vast universe. Bone continent, Phantom sucked in a breath of cold air, and at the same time, she saw a tall figure slowly walking through the vast universe. Purple robes and long hair. However, the spell had concealed the purple-robed man's face. The purple-robed man's long sleeves hung down as he stepped on the purple clouds and walked in the air as if he was walking on flat ground. Then, the purple-clothed man looked in the direction of the shattered starry sky and let out a long sigh. The emotions in that sigh were too complicated. Beside him was a blue-clothed young girl. There was a hint of sadness in the girl's eyes that could not be erased. Soulless, formless, shadowless, rootless, they seemed to be wanderers of the vast universe. Ding, ding, dang, dang. The girl in blue was wearing a string of purple wind chimes. Ding, ding, dang, dang, dang. The purple wind chimes reverberated through the vast universe, pleasant to the ears. To the cultivators outside the array, they could only hear the faint buzzing of the dice cup. They could not see the purple-clothed ghost either. Inside the array, the ghost body was already trembling slightly. Ancestor. The ghost looked at the purple-clothed man and softly called out. At the same time, something seemed to explode in her mind. The purple mountain collapsed, and blood flowed like a river. The sound of the wind chimes reverberated. Sumo, you dare to pry into my inner demons? Inside the array, the ghost howled at the sky and suddenly flew up. Outside the array, the chaotic soul realm cultivators all saw the changes inside the array. But Sumo saw everything clearly. But at this moment, Sumo's eyes were also filled with shock, because he had only imitated the world inside the Pure Land Galaxy art and created this illusion. The other explosions, the bones, the purple-clothed man, the blue-clothed girl, and the purple wind chimes were not his doing. Spells generated each other. This was the only explanation that Sumo could come up with. In other words, his illusion array had stimulated some of Ghastly Shadow's subconscious or Ghastly Shadow's memories. Then, they fused together to form everything. Sumo, you dare to pry into my inner demons. Sumo heard this sentence clearly, but it was not Sumo's true intention. Sumo did not understand what the ghost's inner demons were. Whoosh, inside the array, the ghost formed a hand seal and directly charged at the purple-clothed man. The ghost knew that it was all an illusion, but the next eye of the array was under the purple-clothed man's feet. Therefore, she had to charge at the purple-clothed man. Luckily, Sumo's array was only for gambling. If it was for killing, the ghost would probably die inside the array. Boom! Bang! The ghost directly scattered the illusion of the purple-clothed man and stood in his position. Everything in front of the ghost suddenly disappeared. Everything in front of Sumo also disappeared. Outside the array, everyone only saw the purple-clothed ghost like a dragon out of the sea, rushing out of the dice cup array. With the momentum of the wind and rain, he quietly landed beside Sumo. Without a sound. Good, the ghost is mighty. Too powerful. In an instant, the praise was like a tide, thunderous again. The cultivators of Ghost City and Dream Capital cheered and were extremely excited. Yu Jiqing let out a long sigh, while Old Ghost was cursing, but his face was full of smiles. The elders of Forgotten Capital, their faces slightly froze. Sumo frowned. Under the many illusions, and even under the situation where the spells had generated inner demons, the ghost still walked out of the array. Amazing! Sumo was also convinced. At this time, the ghost was standing beside Sumo, but Sumo could not pry into any of her aura. Wah! Suddenly, the ghost bent over and violently spat out a mouthful of blood. Huh! The faces of the people of Ghost City changed. In order to walk out of Sumo's array, the ghost was actually injured. The people of Dream Capital also looked nervous. If the ghost was injured, the two cities would definitely lose. Old Ghost waved his hand, and two female cultivators behind him wanted to go over to support the ghost. However, the ghost raised one hand, indicating that there was no need. The two female cultivators did not dare to go over. Sumo leaned to one side, wanted to support the ghost. However, the ghost's body suddenly retreated, like a wisp of purple smoke, and then did not let Sumo touch him at all. Huh! Sumo was stunned. Cultivators were definitely not ordinary men and women. Sumo's support, just now, was just out of politeness. However, the ghost's reaction was somewhat out of Sumo's expectations. "Thank you, fellow Taoist Su," the ghost said. "It's just a small injury, no problem. Let's continue the third round." Sumo looked at the bloodstain on the ground. It turned out to be a mouthful of bluish-purple blood, not an ordinary person. Sumo did not say much, and looked at the ghost with a smile. "Miss, you're injured. We can slightly adjust our breathing. It won't be too late to compete again. It's just a small injury. There's no need to adjust." The ghost's voice had completely recovered its calmness. At this time, all the cultivators present were amazed at the superb skills of Sumo and the ghost. 2 rounds of gambling, 1 win and 1 loss. It was really a well-matched match, and the general had met a good talent. This battle was getting more and more exciting. However, what would the two compete in the third round? Okay, Sumo did not listen. Gather, Dirty Charm Zheng, Mo Chen, Sincere Neon Inlaid Tailor, stands tall. The ghost raised his head slightly again. At that moment, Sumo saw 2 faint purple eyes under the purple robe. Chapter 251. Betting on Puppet Techniques? Sumo's heart skipped a beat. That was because among his many techniques, the one he was most proficient in was the skeleton technique. And the skeleton technique was a type of puppet technique. Could it be that the Phantom Shadow was also proficient in puppet techniques? Since the Phantom Shadow proposed to bet on puppet techniques, it must be his forte. After all, no one would use their own weakness to attack the opponent's strength in a bet. However, Sumo did not agree immediately, but frowned slightly. Puppet techniques? Miss Phantom Shadow, how do we compete in puppet techniques? Each of us will control a puppet, then let the puppet shake the cup, roll the dice, and then compare the number of points. How about that? The Phantom Shadow said, controlling the puppet to shake the cup, roll the dice. When all the cultivators heard this, they felt that it was extremely novel. The puppet technique itself was an extremely high-level technique. Cultivators who could control puppets were as powerful as spirit cultivators who could tame beasts. According to the legends of the Pure Land, there was once a puppet clan in the distant galaxy. They were invincible among those of the same level, and single-handedly massacred an entire city. The combat power of puppet cultivators was evident. However, they had never heard of anyone who wanted to let a puppet shake the cup and compete with the dice. One should know that puppet shaking the cup was much more difficult than puppet fighting. That was because if he wanted to get the number he wanted, he had to have perfect control over the puppet. Puppet techniques could not be achieved without reaching the peak of perfection. Oh, Sumo was also surprised. Sumo had never tried to control a puppet like that. And this bet was undoubtedly a combination of puppet techniques and gambling techniques. The difficulty was far above the two alone. Puppet techniques, gambling techniques. When the Phantom Shadow cultivators heard this, they all looked at Sumo and sneered. Because Sumo was hesitating, they naturally thought that Sumo was inferior to the Phantom Shadow. The Dream Capital cultivators felt that it was inconceivable. On the other hand, the cultivators of Forgotten City were worried for Su and Mo. They actually hoped that Sumo would reject this bet. In fact, the third bet was agreed upon, and Sumo could totally reject it. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu looked at each other with a bitter smile. Now, the two brothers no longer had the burden of recommending Sumo, fearing that they would make a mistake. Because Sumo's performance was enough to explain everything. Although he had just lost a round, that round had already injured Phantom. Puppetry? Could Sumo do it? Almost at the same time, the two of them recalled Sumo's reply. I only know a little. However, at this moment, the brothers were already full of admiration for Sumo. Smithing, alchemy, and array formations, Sumo was skilled in all of them. Now, Sumo's hesitation actually proved that Sumo also knew a little about puppetry. Otherwise, there would be no need for her to hesitate. However, did Sumo have the confidence to win? If they couldn't win, then they wouldn't even get 10% of the mine. The cultivators of Wangdu City were a little worried. Miss Ghost Shadow, how should we choose the puppet? Sumo asked again. We will use our own, of course, Phantom answered. How many dice cups? How many dice? Sumo asked. 9 dice cups, 81 dice. Each dice cup has 9 dice, Gue Ing answered. 9 dice cups, 81 dice. The cultivators from the chaotic gods' continent grinned when they heard that. Forget puppets. Even the cultivators themselves would find it difficult to control so many dice cups and dice. What? Fellow Taoist Su, are you afraid? Phantom sneered. Hee. Sumo looked at Phantom and shook her head with a smile. Miss Ghost Shadow, aren't you at a disadvantage with a little provocation? However, I, Sumo, will accept this round. We will control the puppets and shake the dice cups to determine the winner. I only hope that if I win, Phantom will be convinced. Okay. As soon as Sumo accepted the challenge, the cultivators of chaotic gods' continent clapped and cheered. This was because the cultivators of the chaotic god realm also wanted to see this strange puppet battle. If I lose, Phantom will not trouble Wangdu or fellow Taoist Su. You must accept your loss. Phantom said. Okay. Su Imo nodded, then turned to He Zhang and said, Senior, I'll have to trouble you to prepare more dice cups and dice. The dice and dice cups just now can't be used anymore. The reason why Suimo made such a request was because the dices and dice cups had traces of an array formation. Okay. He Zhang waved his hand, and people prepared everything again. They cleaned up all the dice and dice cups in the field. 18 brand new dice cups and a sufficient number of dice were prepared. They were all listed on the stone table in the center. Of course, this was a gamble, not a martial battle. However, the atmosphere in the field was tense, and it could be said that swords were drawn. This was because the round between Sumo and Phantom was the last one. The outcome of this round would determine the final distribution of the Supreme Grade Spirit Stone Mine. Please. Suemo made a pleased gesture at Phantom. Whoosh! The ghostly figure flicked his purple sleeves. A black-robed person instantly appeared in front of her. The black-robed person was tall and slender, but there seemed to be nothing under his clothes. His sleeves reached his knees and fluttered in the wind. The black-robed person wore a hood and a white mask. His face could not be seen at all. His appearance was indeed somewhat similar to that of Ghost Shadow. A human puppet. In an instant, the cultivators in the field were in an uproar. That ghostly figure had actually summoned a humanoid puppet. Perhaps the puppet's true appearance was not that of a real person, but it was wearing a black robe. Therefore, he looked like a puppet on the surface. Moreover, the puppet gave off an extremely subtle aura. At that moment, Sumo felt that she was facing a cultivator. However, Sumo could not determine his cultivation level. This puppet was enough to prove that Phantom's mastery of puppetry was extraordinary. Fellow Taoist Su, it's your turn. Phantom's meaning was clear. He had already summoned his puppet and was waiting for Sumo to do the same. Sumo chuckled. Then, he willed it. Whoosh! A ray of white light flew out from his storage pouch. At that moment, an even more bizarre aura permeated the surroundings. It did not seem to be the aura of the chaotic gods' continent. At that moment, all the cultivators in the chaotic gods' continent felt their bodies tighten. It was an extremely unique feeling. An unknown power seemed to be restraining everything around it. What did Sumo summon? The cultivators of the 3 capitals were startled. Even the cultivators of the forgotten capital city raised their eyebrows. Because that kind of feeling makes people progress. The corner of Phantom's robe swayed slightly. Whoosh! The ray of white light landed in front of Sumo. Whoosh! The cultivators in the chaotic gods continent were in an uproar again, because beside Sumo stood a skeleton that emitted a white light all over its body. For cultivators, skeletons were not scary or surprising. However, Sumo's skeleton was too unique. A skeleton puppet? Which sect in the chaotic gods continent does that belong to? I've never heard of it. Is it someone from the corpseless sect? Chill. Don't talk nonsense. If the corpseless sect comes, none of us will survive. Chapter 252. Sumo, you're not from the chaotic gods continent. The Phantom Shadow's question made all the cultivators present shudder. At the same time, they felt that the white skeleton was too special. Oh, huh. Sumo raised an eyebrow, then sneered at the Phantom Shadow. Miss Phantom Shadow, are you afraid to show your face? And you're asking me if I'm from the chaotic gods continent? I'm from the chaotic gods continent. So what? So what if I'm not from the chaotic gods continent? Is that going to affect today's bet? Sumo looked at the Phantom Shadow coldly. At this moment, Sumo was rather displeased. Of course not, the Phantom Shadow said. The Phantom Shadow seemed to realize that he had misspoken, so he didn't pursue the matter further. Sumo was right. Whether or not he was from the chaotic gods continent wouldn't affect the bet. However, the Phantom Shadow was more concerned about Sumo's background. 2 wins out of 3. Small for the first round, big for the second, and there's no third round. Sumo interrupted the Phantom Shadow. You won't win a single round, Phantom Shadow. Sumo's eyes glinted coldly. In that moment, he felt a trace of hostility toward the Phantom Shadow. He didn't want the cultivators of the chaotic gods continent to care too much about his background. Let's see. The Phantom Shadow replied coldly. Are the two of you ready? He and Zhang, who was the notary, asked. Sumo and the Phantom Shadow nodded in unison. Good. Begin. He and Zhang shouted. Sumo began to form hand seals. No one noticed that Sumo was holding an ancient fan in her hand. The red dust pendant was in Sumo's hand. That way, Sumo could control the white skeleton to its fullest extent. The Phantom Shadow stood with his hands at his sides, not moving much. The only thing that could be seen were 2 faint rays of purple light, like a pair of eyes. Sumo's hand seals were understandable, but the Phantom Shadow's puppetry technique was something no one had ever seen before. None of the cultivators could understand how she was controlling the puppets. Sumo was also shocked. Could it be that Ghost Shadow's puppetry technique had reached the realm of one with the puppet? Who? Looking again, the black-clothed puppet and the white skeleton moved almost at the same time. The movements of the 2 puppets were extremely smooth. The black-clothed puppet flicked its sleeves, and 9 dice cups flew into the air. 81 dice were placed into each cup, with 9 dice in each cup, without a single mistake. The skeleton's technique was almost the same. The 2 puppets were like 2 high-level cultivators. Their movements were as smooth as flowing water. The cultivators in the chaotic god realm were moved by this scene, and they couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. This was because if the skeleton was also wearing a long robe, everyone would think that 2 powerful cultivators were having a battle. Whoosh, whoosh. The 2 puppets also waved all the dice cups in the air, making them look very beautiful. However, everyone's attention was no longer on the puppet's technique. Instead, they were waiting for the bell to ring. Who? The black-clothed puppet spread its hands, and the bell was the first to ring. The 9 dice cups were lined up in a row, also silent. At that moment, the corner of Sumo's mouth curled up, because he already knew what the other party's number was. Victory was already in his hands. Who? The white skeleton's arms fell, and the 9 dice cups belonging to Sumo also fell on the stone table. Then, the 2 puppets didn't move anymore. He and Zhang stood in the middle, watching everything. Then he waved his hand. The other 2 He brothers also stood in the middle. He and Zhang was very cautious when opening the cups this time. Yin Xiao opened Ghost Shadow's 9 dice cups first. He and Zhang said, "Yes." He and Xiao replied. Then he waved his hand, and the aura of a great perfection soul transformation realm expert spread out. The 9 dice cups were opened at the same time. At that moment, everyone held their breath and stared at the stone table. Whoosh! The cultivators of the ghost capital were the first to cheer. Then, the entire square was filled with sounds of shock and admiration. It was definitely a shocking scene. There were a total of 9 dice cups, and when each cup was opened, there were 9 dice stacked on top of each other. The top dice had a dot with a red heart. 1 dot. Every dice cup was a dot. The 9 dice cups had a total of 9 dots. This was already the theoretical minimum number of points. Sumo's puppet could at most roll the same number as her. It was impossible for it to be smaller. If it was a cultivator, it might not be difficult to roll such a number. However, don't forget that it was a puppet. Ghost Shadow's puppet technique was indeed at the peak. The puppet shaking the cup did not seem to be much different from her. It was just that there was an extra sound. The expressions of the cultivators of the Ghost Capital and Dream Capital were relaxed, because at least they were in an invincible position this round. However, due to Sumo's performance in the previous 2 rounds, they didn't dare to be as arrogant as before. Even the old ghost of the Ghost Capital was staring at Sumo's 9 dice cups with a reserved expression. At this moment, Sumo's expression was calm, and there was even a cold smile hanging on the corner of her mouth. Her performance made the people of the Forgotten Capital feel a little more at ease. Ghost Shadow 9 dots, He Yunzhong said. Yunsheng opened Sumo's 9 dice cups. Yes. He Yunsheng also waved his hand, using the same method as He Yunshao. Whoosh! The 9 dice cups were suddenly opened. Ah! The moment the 9 dice cups were opened, it was accompanied by the exclamations of the cultivators present. The rule of the bet was that the dice could not be shaken to the point. Therefore, everyone thought that Sumo could not possibly have a lower than 9 dots. However, a strange scene appeared. That was why the crowd exclaimed. The expressions of the 3 He brothers from the Green Fushan mountain changed, because they had never seen such a situation before. It turned out that the dice that the skeleton puppet shook were the same as the dice that the black-clothed puppet had shaken. They both had 9 stacked on top of each other. This was also the best way to reduce the number of dots. However, the only difference was that the skeleton puppet didn't end up with a red heart on the top of the die. However, all the 8 dice had a red dot facing up. The top die actually had a corner as the fulcrum, and it landed right in the 8th red dot, while the other corner stood at the very top. This meant that one of the dice's corners was facing up, and there were no dots. 0 dots. 9 dice with 0 dots. Not to mention the puppet. Even if the 1,000 hands ailing immortal was here, he might not be able to shake out such a number. That was shaking 9 dice cups at the same time, with 9 dice in each cup. If there was a slight error in the control of strength, it would be impossible. The 3 He brothers looked at each other. The entire crowd, after the shock, was instantly dead silent. Good. Sumo impressive. After a while, Do Tianlu of the Forgotten Capital was the first to break the silence, shouting loudly. This caused countless exclamations of admiration from the crowd. Just now, they were truly shocked, speechless. Sumo's puppet skills and gambling skills were truly unparalleled in the world. The cultivators present had their horizons broadened today. This bet was truly thrilling. There would always be someone stronger than the strong, and there was always a higher mountain. Guiying, how was it? Sumo looked at Guiying and said, This round I lost. Again. Guiying did not waste any words, but directly controlled the black-clothed puppet. The 9 dice cups were raised again, and silver light flew. Sumo did not say much. Chapter 253. Clatter, clatter. The 2 puppets displayed their abilities. 18 dice cups danced in the air. The 9 dices in each dice cup clanked against the walls of the cups. This round was a big bet. Whoever had more points would win. Let's see who could still throw a miracle. Guiying couldn't lose anymore. If she lost this round, she would be completely defeated. Therefore, the cultivators of Ghastly Capital and Mengdu were extremely nervous. A top-grade spirit stone mine could only be found by luck. It was a resource that could support a city for tens of thousands of years. Losing 10% was like cutting off a piece of meat. Old Gue and Yu Jiqing were watching intently, their expressions tense. They were observing the bet, and, at the same time, preventing Sumo from cheating. For the same reason, the elders of Ghastly Capital were also watching Gue Ying. However, both Sumo and Gue Ying were only responsible for controlling the puppets. They didn't break any rules. They didn't directly control the dice cups or the dices. Clatter, clatter. In this round, the two puppets shook the cups for a relatively long time. Sumo and Gue Ying both gave it their all. The two puppets' bodies emitted a faint glow. Each move was extremely meticulous. Each of their 9 dice cups danced in the air. It was almost dusk. Today's battle had truly exhausted everyone's mental and physical energy. Everyone was waiting for the puppets to drop the cups. Whoosh, whoosh. Looking again, the two puppets moved at almost the same time, their hands pressing down. Bang, bang, bang. 18 dice cups fell one after another. But this time, the drop was different from before. Previously, it had always been silent, but this time the 18 dice cups seemed to have been smashed on a stone table, making loud noises. Many cultivators shuddered. They had a feeling that this round was going to be strange. The dice cups fell, and the two puppets stopped. Sumo and Gue Ying looked at the three brothers. Senior He, I request to open the cups at the same time. Gue Ying said. Sumo couldn't help but smile, because the outcome of this round was already in his heart. Sure, He Yinzhang nodded, then gestured for He Yinshao and He Yinshang to open their cups at the same time. Everything had come to an end, so there was no need to say anything more. The cultivators present could not wait to see the result. The two perfected soul transformation realm cultivators opened their cups at the same time. With a flick of his sleeves, spiritual energy gushed out. Swish, 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 swish. 18 dice cups flew up like silver dragons. Looking at the dice in their respective dice cups, the expressions of the cultivators present changed drastically. The cultivators of Ghost Capital and Dream Capital looked at Ghost Shadow's points first. However, under each of Phantom's dice cups, there were actually 18 dice. 9 points, 9 points. In theory, it was already the maximum number of 6 points for all 9 of them. However, no one expected that the black-clothed puppet would split all the dice into 2 and charge up. In this way, each cup was worth 63 points. This was already a miracle, because this was beyond the norm. However, the cultivators of Ghost Capital and Dream Capital didn't even have time to rejoice, because when they saw the condition of Sumo's dice cup, their faces were ashen and they were speechless. Whoosh! At this time, everyone saw the bet between the two sides clearly, and they almost couldn't control themselves. Phantom's points had already exceeded the norm. However, Sumo's points were even more of a miracle, because the moment the dice cup flew up, the place where the dice cup flew up on the stone table was actually covered with points. The black-clothed puppet had divided a dice into 2 halves, but the white skeleton had divided a dice into 6 parts. The points of each part were all facing up. In this way, one dice could throw 21 points. One dice cup had a total of 9 dice, so it was 129 points. The points in one dice cup of Sumo was comparable to the points in 2 dice cups of Phantom. Everyone at the scene was shocked. Even the people from the Wangdu city were shocked speechless by Sumo's methods. That was simply impossible. At this time, they finally understood why the 2 puppets made loud bangs when they dropped the cups. After the shock, the audience was silent. Phantom, of course, also saw Sumo's bet, and the corner of her clothes fluttered lightly. Phantom, thank you for letting me win. I won. The corner of Sumo's mouth curved, and she slightly cupped her fists at Phantom. At that moment, the audience was still silent. The people of Dream Capital and Ghost Capital all looked at Phantom in a daze, because they really didn't want to admit defeat. Admit defeat. Phantom's purple clothes slightly swayed, and he slowly said, Whoosh! The cultivators of Forgotten Capital suddenly cheered. The cultivators of Dream Capital were dumbfounded, and the cultivators of Ghost Capital suddenly changed their expressions. We don't accept this. Old Ghost was the first to shout. He wanted to stir up trouble. Yes, we don't accept this. The other cultivators of Ghost City immediately echoed. For a moment, it was chaos. At the same time, the cultivators of Dream Capital were also ready to move. The He brothers of Qing Fu Mountain instantly raised their eyebrows, because they were the notary. However, Sumo coldly looked at Phantom. Phantom, shouldn't you say something? Shut up. Phantom's voice wasn't loud, but it clearly passed into everyone's ears, full of deterrence. Phantom, lost. I admit defeat. If anyone dares to accept this, please come find me. Old Ghost, the ghost can only take 30% of the mind. Those who disobey will be killed. Huh? Old Ghost's face changed when he heard this. He didn't dare to question and quickly bowed. We obey the decree. Decree? The cultivators present were shocked. Could this phantom be a deity's tribulation cultivator of Ghost City? Since Ghost Capital had already expressed its stance, Yu Jiqing of Dream Capital slightly laughed. If you agree to bet, you admit defeat. It is only right and proper. My Dream Capital's 20% is also considered to be biased. Congratulations, Brother Zhuge. Congratulations, little Brother Su. Yu Jiqing was a shrewd person. Seeing that the situation couldn't be reversed, it was better to push the boat with the current and form a good karma. This time he suffered a loss. There would be opportunities in the future to slowly make up for it. Haha, thank you for letting me win. Thank you for letting me win. Zhuge Hong led the elders of Forgotten Capital and cupped their fists. In the future, we will still be one. Don't let this small mind bet damage the harmony. Not at all. Not at all. Ha! Old Ghost and Yu Jiqing both regained the bearing of an elder. No matter how much the elders of the three capitals cursed in their hearts, on the surface, they still maintained a harmonious atmosphere. At this moment, Su Mo was looking at Phantom Shadow with a slight smile. Lady Phantom, just now you said that only by defeating you can I see your true appearance. I wonder if I can have the honor to see your true appearance? Hee hee. Phantom laughed coldly, then waved one hand. That black puppet instantly turned into a black light and hid in Phantom's long sleeve. Sumo, if you want to see my true appearance. 3 days later, I will wait for you at Fengling, Ancient Town. As long as you dare to come. Today I have lost. This purple robe, I will give it to you. Goodbye. With that, Phantom's purple robe fell to the ground. Whoosh, but inside the purple robe, it was empty. At that moment, Sumo was shocked. Everyone was shocked. So, there was actually nothing inside the purple robe. Sumo couldn't help but take a deep breath. Phantom? Phantom! Chapter 254. The ghostly shadow was a puppet. This discovery shocked everyone present. On this day, all the cultivators present were in constant shock. As the scenes unfolded, the astonished expressions on their faces almost never disappeared. Waves of surprises came one after another. The ghostly shadow that forced the 1,000 hands ailing immortal away was actually a puppet. At that moment, these cultivators finally understood why the ghostly shadow wore a purple robe and a hood. They also finally understood why the ghostly shadow's aura was so strange. It was because the ghostly shadow was not a real cultivator. A hint of surprise flashed across Old Ghost's face. However, he was not surprised at the ghostly shadow's identity, but the fact that the ghostly shadow left the purple robe for Sumo. One had to know that the purple robe was not an ordinary item. At that moment, the one who was the most shocked was actually Sumo. Sumo had inherited the windmill inheritance and was proficient in many techniques. At the same time, he was a real deity's tribulation cultivator. However, he did not realize that the ghostly shadow was not a human at all. Shadow puppet. That was an extremely high level of puppetry. The shadow puppet was, in fact, a projection of a puppet master. Second senior brother was knowledgeable, and there were records of this kind of puppet in his inheritance. Therefore, Sumo knew a little about it, but he had never seen it before. The shadow puppet was more of a legend. It was impossible to see it on the White Bones continent. Sumo did not expect to encounter the shadow puppet the first time he entered the chaotic gods continent. I actually racked my brains to fight a puppet? Sumo mocked himself in his heart. He understood that if the real body of the ghostly shadow puppet was here, Sumo, would definitely not be its opponent. There was always someone better out there. Sumo suddenly felt that he was being too frivolous. Then, he smiled bitterly and took the purple robe with a wave of his hand. A deity's tribulation treasure? As soon as the purple robe entered his hand, Sumo was slightly stunned, because the purple robe glowed with a faint power of deity's tribulation. Moreover, it seemed to be the power of a peak deity's tribulation. The ghostly shadow actually left such a treasure for him? For a moment, Sumo was a little confused about Phantom Shadow's intentions. In the battle just now, the two of them were completely opposite each other. How would Guei give him such a precious treasure in the end? 3 days later, Wind Ancient Town. Sumo smiled bitterly in her heart and thought, but where can I find her then? He had no idea what the other party looked like. Could it be that there was another ghostly figure? With a flick of her hand, Sumo took back the white skeleton and then put the purple robe into her storage pouch. As for the purple robe, Sumo decided to give it to white skeleton number 64 that she used the most. This way, he could hide the aura and appearance of the white skeleton so that it wouldn't be a little shocking every time it came out. Little brother Su, you are indeed amazing. At this moment, all the elders of Forgotten City gathered around, and Zhuge Hong was the first to cup his fists. Little brother Su, it's all thanks to your help this time. Jean Mantang laughed heartily. The other elders, Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu, all came over to congratulate him, all of them beaming with joy. However, there were some things that were not suitable to be said here. Many things were more suitable to be discussed after returning to the city. Thus, the people of Wangdu City greeted the elders and cultivators of Ghost Metropolis and Dream Metropolis. Then, they invited the He brothers. Unfortunately, the He brothers declined the invitation to avoid arousing suspicion and only said that they would meet another day. In the end, all the cultivators of Forgotten City, including Sumo, returned to Forgotten City in a grandiose manner. This time, the situation was completely different. When they arrived in the morning, the people of Forgotten City could be said to be uncertain and uneasy. However, now that they returned to the city, they were all dignified and full of smiles. When Sumo and the rest returned to the city, Forgotten City had already received the news. 50% of the supreme grade spiritual stone mine's share to Forgotten City was like a pie falling from the sky. This 50% of the supreme grade spiritual stone mine could almost guarantee that Forgotten City would not have to worry for 10,000 years. Therefore, Forgotten City's gates were open wide, and it was decorated with lanterns and banners. Su Mo became the most esteemed guest of the entire Forgotten capital, a hero of the city. In Forgotten City, in the Castle of the Elders, a banquet was already prepared. Sumo and the rest naturally went straight to the castle. Outside the castle, 2 old cultivators, dressed in white robes, were waiting. They were 2 soul, transformation, great perfection. One was called Qiu He, and the other was called Yin Lu. However, they were usually not in the elders but in closed-door training. This time, Qiu He and Yin Lu came out of closed-door training to thank Sumo for helping Forgotten City obtain 50% of the supreme grade spiritual stone mine. Zhuge Hong introduced Sumo and the 2 soul transformation great perfection to each other. Everyone naturally exchanged courteous words and chatted for a while. This night became Forgotten City's carnival night. Inside the castle, almost all of Forgotten City's reputable cultivators were present. They frequently toasted Sumo, and Sumo did not reject any of them. Therefore, they drank to their heart's content that night. Sumo also had not drunk like this for a long time. In the end, only the 9 soul transformation great perfection of the elders, as well as the 2 white-robed soul transformation great perfection Qiu He, Yin Lu, as well as Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu were left to accompany her. The rest, those with insufficient status, left one after another. At this moment, everyone understood that Sumo was definitely not a nascent soul middle stage cultivator. Everyone could not see through Sumo's cultivation level. Then there was only one possibility. Sumo was a deity tribulation, or even higher. However, no one said it out loud, because there were many things that would be easier to deal with if one did not say it out loud. Zhuge Hong raised his cup again and said, "Little brother Su, we will not say many words of thanks. Previously, we promised that if little brother Su helped us win the bet, we will give you 1,000 supreme grade spiritual stones. At the same time, we will make you an honorary elder of Forgotten City. However, at that time, we only hope to get 20% of the mine." Hee. That's right. Jean Mantang knew what Zhuge Hong wanted to say, and hurriedly nodded. The other elders nodded their heads in agreement. It seemed that they had already reached an agreement. Sumo smiled, but did not say anything. When the tide rises, the boat rises. How could Forgotten City not understand this logic? Because without Sumo, they would only be able to get 10% of the mine. So, Zhuge Hong purposely paused, looked at Sumo with a smile and said, "Little brother Su, Forgotten City has decided to give you 20% of the supreme grade spiritual stone mine. How about that? 20% of the supreme grade spiritual stone mine." Once Sumo heard this, her heart skipped a beat. Because that was a mine, it was not a joke. Even 10% of it was in the tens of millions. This was a world of difference from the 1,000 supreme grade spiritual stones that was just a drop in the ocean. This meant that Wangdu City had truly realized its value. Sumo thought of the benefits that Forgotten City would give her, because that was human nature. However, Sumo did not expect Forgotten City to be so generous and generous. Although, without Sumo, Forgotten City could not even get 20%, but when they had 50%, they were willing to give 20% to Sumo. This was not easy. A city getting 30%, and a person getting 20%. After all, this mine actually belonged to Sandu. Forgotten City's elders knew when to advance and when to retreat. This was extremely rare. Chapter 255. A Presumptuous Request. Sumo looked at Zhuge Hong and smiled faintly. "Elder Zhuge, if there's anything that you need my help with, Sumo, as long as it's within my capabilities, you don't have to stand on ceremony." "Oh, haha." Zhuge Hong laughed heartily. "Since little brother Su is so straightforward, then let's have a toast first." Zhuge Hong raised his cup, accompanied by Chiu He, Yun Lu, and the other elders. Everyone drank another cup together. Then, Zhuge Hong put down his wine glass and sighed as he looked at Sumo. "Sigh. I won't hide it from little brother Su. Among the so-called 3 cities of the southern region, my Forgotten City is actually the weakest. Ghost City and Mingdu had never placed Wangdu in their eyes. Otherwise, they wouldn't have only gotten 20% of the profits. Now, if it wasn't for the fact that there are still a few large teleportation formations in Wangdu City, the former North Ferry Crossing would have long been desolate." When Zhuge Hong said that, the other elders nodded helplessly and sighed softly. Life in Forgotten Capital City was not easy. In the entire chaotic Gods continent, the Forgotten City was only a third-rate city. Today, with little brother Su's help, our Forgotten Capital City can finally hold our heads high. Zhuge Hong said in a clear voice that 50% of the highest grade spiritual stone mineral was actually obtained by your brother Su after he gambled for me. Wangdu, little brother Su, don't think it's too little. After all, there are hundreds of thousands of cultivators in Forgotten Capital City. Little brother Su, your gambling skills are exquisite, and you're good at everything. Although our realms are limited, we still have some foresight. We know that you have hidden your abilities well." Zhuge Hong looked at Chiu He and Yun Lu. The other two nodded with a smile. It seemed like the 3 great perfection of the soul transformation realm had reached an agreement regarding that request. Elder Zhuge is too courteous. Sumo didn't say much as he was waiting for Zhuge Hong to continue. "Brother Su, I don't have much either. Aluminum Shuem, Ji Chiao Chong Bad Ignorant Song Xian Shan Siamo Chao Me Huizhu. Huh? Fool around with me? Arrogant and shallow? Lazy and lazy? Eh. Subliminal acupoint? Help. A churn? Ji chao ji, shi shi hui. Reeling in chlorine wan wei jun. My humble gang paddling the marshes to visit the Dangwon. Ji chao nan chiha? This, Sumo was shocked. He had never thought that Zhuge Hong would actually make such a request. Forgotten capital city's great elder? To be honest, Sumo had never thought about it. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu, who were sitting beside him, were also taken aback. That was because that was the decision of the Elders Guild. They did not have the right to know about it in advance. However, upon hearing the suggestion, it could be seen from their eyes that they completely agreed and were even a little excited. After all, Sumo had met them first. However, Sumo pondered for a moment. Forgotten capital city's great elder. That was definitely a very tempting position. One had to know that there were at least hundreds of thousands of cultivators in Forgotten Capital City. Among the hundreds of thousands of cultivators, almost all were at the core formation or nascent soul stage. Even in the chaotic gods continent, they were a force that could not be ignored. The position of the great elder of Forgotten Capital City was definitely not low. Especially in a place like the chaotic gods continent, having a city supporting you, even if it was just a third or fourth-rate city, meant a lot. However, Sumo understood that if he agreed to be the great elder of Forgotten Capital City, then he would have to shoulder too many responsibilities and obligations. He had to be responsible for the hundreds of thousands of citizens of Forgotten Capital City. Thank you, Elder Zhuge and everyone else, for your kindness. Sumo shook his head and smiled. However, I am used to wandering around. Sumo is an idle person. I still have to travel the world and train myself. I definitely cannot accept the position of great elder. Otherwise, I'm afraid I will only harm myself and others, and I will be letting Forgotten Capital City down. Oh, Zhuge Hong looked at Qiu He and Yin Lu. The three of them actually looked at each other and smiled. It seemed that Sumo's excuse was within their expectations. The white-robed soul cultivator, Qiu He, spoke. Little brother Su, your concerns are actually within the scope of our consideration. As you can see, although junior brother Yin and I are also the elders of Forgotten Capital City, we almost never participate in the daily affairs. Usually, senior brother Zhuge is in charge. To be honest, because senior brother Zhuge has no hope of advancing to the deity tribulation, but junior brother Yin and I have a sliver of hope. So, junior brother Yin and I have been cultivating with all our might. Usually, it is senior brother Zhuge who is burdened. Today, if it wasn't for little brother Su winning 50% of the mineral resources for Forgotten Capital City, we wouldn't have come out to meet you. So, senior brother Zhuge means that even if you become the great elder of Forgotten Capital City, you will not be entangled with trifling matters. Everything in Forgotten Capital will still be managed by the Elder Council. You can wander if you want, stay if you want, but your identity is the elder of Forgotten Capital City. At crucial moments, the entire Forgotten Capital City will listen to your orders. Usually, you will not be distracted. However, Qiu He paused, then stood up and bowed deeply to Sumo. However, if Forgotten Capital is in trouble, I hope that little brother Su will help us with all your might. I hope that little brother Su will do his best to help and fulfill his responsibility as the great elder. That would be the fortune of Forgotten Capital City. So, I hope that little brother Su will consider it. Qiu He had already stood up, so how could the other elders still be sitting? The 7 great elders of the Elder Council and Yin Lu also stood up and bowed. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu were both nascent soul cultivators. At this moment, the two of them looked at each other, gritted their teeth, and actually knelt down on one knee. Senior Su, please agree to Forgotten Capital City's request. Let Forgotten Capital City not be bullied. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu said in unison. This kneeling was enough to show their sincerity. This Senior Su pointed out Sumo's identity. Forgotten Capital City really needed a cultivator like Sumo. Otherwise, even if they had the spirit mind, they might not be able to stand firmly here. The 11 soul transformation stage elders bowed and asked. 2 nascent soul peak stage cultivators knelt and asked. This scene made Sumo smile bitterly in his heart. Sumo was a person who valued friendship. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been depressed about the matter of the 5 wheels for 100 years. Facing these forgotten capital people whom he had only known for a few days, but were quite sincere at this moment, Sumo's heart was filled with emotions. Of course, benefits were important, but friendship was also indispensable. Today, without any one of them, Sumo would not agree. However, the current forgotten capital city had both, and Shio He's words were very clear. Actually, forgotten capital city lacked a sense of security because they didn't have the God's tribulation. However, Sumo could help them, and they were all sincerely convinced by Sumo. Thus, Sumo already had a plan in his heart. After all, this was a win-win situation. Brother Fu, Brother Do, please get up. Sumo first helped the 2 up, smiled, and said, "It's more comfortable for us to call each other brothers." Elders, you don't have to do so. Sumo, how can you do this? Little brother Su, then you agree? Zhuge Hong said. Sumo smiled, then said, "If it's really as Elder Chio said, then I will respectfully accept." Good, good, good. Zhuge Hong said the word good 3 times in a row, extremely excited. The other elders also applauded and cheered. They felt like a stone had been lifted from their hearts. Then they saw Zhuge Hong take out a token from his chest. It was a golden token, no bigger than 3 inches, but it shone with golden light. On the token, there were many inscriptions, as well as the words Forgotten Capital. It was definitely not an ordinary item. Zhuge Hong held the token in his palm very solemnly, then presented it to Sumo. Little brother Su, this is the order of Forgotten Capital City's Great Elder. Today, I will present it to you. From today onwards, seeing this token is like seeing a person. As long as little brother Su has an order, we will not hesitate. We also hope that little brother Su will not forget our city and keep it in your heart. Zhuge Hong said solemnly, and Sumo's expression also became serious. Since he had already agreed, Sumo did not hesitate and took the token with both hands. That token was very heavy. Greetings, Great Elder. The moment Sumo received the order, everyone present knelt down on one knee and paid their respects. At that moment, Sumo's heart shook. Deep in his soul, he seemed to be reliving the beauty of commanding the 3 realms. Chapter 256. The Grand Elder of the Wangdu was Sumo's new identity. The next day, the elders of the Wangdu Council announced the news to the entire city. The entire city was excited and spread the news by word of mouth. In fact, on the day of the bet, Sumo's miracle had already spread throughout the city. Therefore, even though it was a bit sudden, everyone was not against it. The cultivators of the Wangdu city were not ordinary. Of course, they knew that Sumo was not a nascent soul cultivator. Those who dared to oppose the ghost city and the Wangdu were all deity tribulation cultivators. Therefore, it was an open secret that Sumo was a deity tribulation cultivator. As the Grand Elder of the Wangdu city, Sumo had to visit the important places in the city. At the very least, he had to understand the Wangdu city. Among the 7 Grand Elders, Jean Montang's gold gathering was unnecessary. However, the other Grand Elders' businesses were Hua Lingjuan's artifact shop, Guo Lengyi's spirit beast shop, Fan Xingyun and Kong Fangzi's spirit stone bank, and Lu Ru's elixir shop. Sumo looked at all of them. Along the way, Sumo pointed out a few random places. Artifact shop. Sumo refined a few soul transformation realm treasures and gave them to them. At that moment, Hua Lingjun was dumbfounded, because Sumo really did refine 2 at random. If she was serious, deity tribulation realm treasures would not be a problem. In the spirit beast shop, Sumo let the little white pig out for a spin. The dragon elephant soul devouring beast, one of the 3 sacred beasts of the Pure Land. Guo Lengyi was about to go crazy, because all the spirit beasts in his spirit beast shop combined were probably not as powerful as the little white pig. Sumo left 2 beast taming techniques for him. In the spirit stone bank, Sumo entrusted 20% of her supreme grade spirit stones to the Spirit Stone Bank. At the same time, she casually asked for 3,000 supreme grade spirit stones in case of emergencies. Now, 3,000 supreme grade spirit stones was really a drop in the ocean for Sumo. In the elixir shop, Sumo gave Lu Ru 2 pill recipes. They were all soul transformation grade pill recipes, and they were unique to the Chaos God's mainland. At that moment, the alluring Lu Ru had the urge to bury herself in Sumo's arms and devote herself to him. In short, Sumo walked for a day, and everywhere she went, she benefited. Zhuge Hong, Fu Wanqing, and Do Tianlu, who had been accompanying him, were initially shocked because they felt that Sumo seemed to be omnipotent. However, later on, they were a little numb, because at the corner of a street, Sumo actually taught a few divination techniques to an old cultivator in the early stage of the core formation realm who set up a stall to do divination. At that time, the old cultivator was moved to tears. Sigh. The great elder Sumo of the forgotten capital city had a simple day of routine inspection, and in the end, it was a success. He won the hearts of the people and spread his good name. In Wangdu City, the news spread like wildfire. Sumo was praised as if she was a god. In the hearts of the people of Forgotten City, he had become the embodiment of omnipotence. That day, Sumo was really quite happy, a rare kind of happiness. However, Sumo knew that she would not stay in Wangdu City for long. Although the city was not bad, Sumo still had many things to do. For example, she needed to find Guan Xiong, ask about the corpseless sect and the so-called state of rebirth, because Sumo still needed to find Mu Jinghong. Of course, those things seemed very far away, so far that Sumo did not know where to start. However, Sumo never forgot. However, there was one thing that Sumo needed to do right now. That was to fulfill the appointment with the Ghost Shadow in 3 days. Fengling Ancient Town. On the Jade Scroll map that Guan Xiong gave to Sumo, there were no markings, because that place was too small. Later on, Sumo obtained a map of the northern region of the Chaotic Gods in Wangdu City. On this map, Fengling Ancient Town was marked. That was a small town 7,000 miles southwest of the Ghost Domain. It was said that it was a desolate place, and cultivators rarely appeared there. Everyone in Wangdu City heard the appointment between the Ghost Shadow and Sumo clearly. Zhuge Hong suggested to send a few more people to follow Sumo. However, Sumo rejected in the end, because he thought that it would be more convenient to go alone. Zhuge Hong and the rest did not insist. They also thought that if Sumo could not solve the problem, it would be a waste of effort to bring anyone along. Therefore, Sumo made some simple preparations. Then, he informed Zhuge Hong and the rest, and rushed to Fengling Ancient Town one day earlier. The straight-line distance between Fengling Ancient Town and Wangdu was actually less than 40,000 miles. Sumo was not in a hurry. Therefore, he only took out the Heavenly Wheel ferry boat. However, this Heavenly Wheel ferry boat had already been re-refined by Sumo and was far better than before. A high-level spirit transformation realm treasure. Among ordinary flying treasures, this was already a very high level. Of course, it cannot be compared to the lotus seat that Grandma gave to Sumo. Driving the ferry boat, they did not speak a word along the way. At dusk, Sumo was 700 miles away from Fengling Ancient Town. According to the mark on the map, there were no cities, villages, or the like in a 3,000-mile radius around Sumo's location. Fengling Ancient Town was actually an abandoned historical site. According to the legend of the deity of chaos, there was a celestial sect within a few thousand-mile radius. However, tens of thousands of years ago, it was exterminated and no longer existed. Therefore, it was desolate until now. Sumo did not care about this, and went straight to Fengling Ancient Town, which was 700 miles away. The sky gradually darkened, and Sumo really did not see any villages or towns. The entire area was empty and desolate. Fortunately, Sumo was bored, so he let the little white pig out. To be honest, when Sumo was lonely, he would let the little fellow out. It was chubby and cute. Seeing its silly look, Sumo could smile knowingly. The little white pig was also happy to come out, because every time it came out, Sumo would never mistreat it. Now the little fellow was a little tired of eating elixirs. For this, the little white pig was very proud, because the big black bird that lived next to it seemed to be rarely summoned by its master. In fact, the little white pig did not understand. Sumo did not like that black feather deity, but she did not want to see it and think of it. That black feather deity was the only thing that Mu Jinghong left for Sumo. Sumo cherished it very much. Only when Sumo was in the most pain would she summon it and caress its feathers. However, the little white pig did not have the chance to see the sadness and loneliness in Sumo's eyes at that moment. On the Skywheel ferry boat, the little white pig was bouncing around, its big eyes rolling around. Unfortunately, it did not find anything fun. They had arrived at Fengling ancient town. However, there was only a piece of ruins, hundreds of miles of ruins. Sumo kept the ferry boat and stood in front of a dilapidated city tower. Fengling ancient town. An ancient stone tablet, nearly 1 zhang tall, was missing a corner. It stood outside the town, full of historical relics, as if it had witnessed the vicissitudes of tens of thousands of years. Sumo raised his eyebrows. He did not understand why that ghostly shadow wanted to meet him in this damned place. This place gave Sumo a rather strange feeling. However, that feeling was unclear and indescribable. However, it was not just eerie and strange. The little white pig, on the other hand, was listlessly climbing on Sumo's shoulder, because it felt very bored. Sumo took out the storm tent and prepared to cultivate in it for the night. Chapter 257. Crack, crack. A strange sound came from Fengling ancient town. Sumo raised an eyebrow. The little white pig snorted and bared its fangs. Sumo and the little white pig looked at a street in Fengling ancient town. The entrance to the street was rather dark and shabby. It was from the east to the west. The street looked like a black hole from afar. Whoosh, whoosh. At that moment, a gust of wind blew in Fengling ancient town. That kind of wind seemed to have suddenly emerged from the ancient town, bringing with it traces of ink. Whoosh, whoosh. The sound of the wind was very special. It sounded like a sorrowful conch. Crack, crack. The sound came from the street again. There seemed to be something trampling over from that long street. Sumo's divine sense spread out, and he could not help but frown slightly, because on that long street, there were people whose bodies were stiff walking over. There were men and women, old and young. In fact, they were not people, but zombies. The little white pig stood on Sumo's shoulder and sniffed. The soul eater Dracophant was very sensitive to such things. It sensed a special soul aura from those zombies. The zombies were of different shapes and levels. The purple zombies, white zombies, green zombies, and hairy zombies were not of high levels. Their footsteps were heavy, and their movements were slow. Every time their feet touched the ground, they would step on the blue stone. Meanwhile, those blue stones were extremely old. Even though they were supported by magical force back then, many of them were now shattered. That was why there was a cracking sound. The zombies were not a threat to Sumo. Not to mention Su and Mo, even if the little white pig went over, it could be destroyed in an instant. However, Sumo and the little white pig did not let their guard down, because there was a strange feeling that had been following them all this time. There was a dangerous aura in Fengling ancient town. The zombies came out of the street, but they did not come for Sumo and the little white pig. Instead, they went straight for a very old courtyard. The courtyard was one of the more complete buildings in Fengling ancient town. The zombies completely ignored Sumo and the little white pig. Or rather, they had no intelligence and did not see Sumo and the little white pig at all. The little white pig snorted. There was actually saliva at the corner of its mouth. There seemed to be no end to the zombies. That street entrance was like an unknown passageway. Moreover, the zombies that walked out seemed to be of higher levels. Hoo-hoo! Finally, a zombie flew out from the corner of the street. However, rather than saying that it was a zombie, it would be more accurate to say that it was a lifeless cultivator. That cultivator was dressed in a black robe, but his face was ashen and his eyes were without light. It was clearly a dead cultivator. However, his physical body was not damaged. Nevertheless, there was a magical power in his body that allowed him to move freely. However, Sumo could sense that the black-robed zombie did not have a trace of consciousness. A walking corpse. Flying zombies. Sumo remembered some legends, but the lifeless cultivator was not completely like a flying zombie. A real flying zombie would never have that kind of power in its body. 1 corpse, 2 corpses, 3. The similar flying zombies kept appearing and floating in the air. They all went to the old courtyard. From Sumo's point of view, those flying zombies were only at the Foundation establishment or core formation realm. Things of this level could not cause any harm to Sumo. Finally, there were no more zombies at the Old Street entrance. There were about 100 zombies in total. They all walked into the ancient courtyard, and then there was no sound, and they never came out again. Sumo and the little white pig watched everything. As the zombies disappeared, the strange wind in the entire ancient town gradually subsided. It seemed that a process had been completed. The street entrance continued to look like a black hole. However, if one went closer, it was no different from an ordinary street entrance. The bluestone paved the ground and ran from east to west. The long street ran through the entire foaming ancient town. None of this made Sumo and the little white pig relax. On the contrary, the little white pig's eyes lit up. Then, it suddenly jumped up from Sumo's shoulder and went straight to the old courtyard. Sumo did not stop it. Instead, she moved and followed the little white pig. The gate of the old courtyard was long gone, but there was a screen wall behind the gate. The screen wall was embossed with all kinds of strange patterns and strange runes. Even with Sumo's vast knowledge, she could not understand those patterns and runes. They seemed to be some secret incantations of an ancient sect. Just now, all the zombies had disappeared behind the screen wall. The little white pig was like a white lightning bolt. That was because it smelled an extremely strong soul aura behind the screen wall. That soul aura was very fragrant to the little white pig. Whoosh! The little white pig directly flew behind the screen wall, and Sumo followed. The scene behind the screen wall shocked Sumo. The little white pig, on the other hand, widened its eyes and opened its mouth. It drooled for a long time. Behind the screen wall, there was a woman sitting cross-legged. Her clothes were very ancient, but she should be a cultivator. The female cultivator's face was ash white, very similar to the flying zombie cultivator. However, the woman's eyes were not ash white. Instead, there was a faint light. However, the light seemed very weak, like a candle flame in the vast night. But the meaning was definitely different, because it represented life. There was life in a dead body. That in itself was something that was worth being shocked by. The most shocking scene was that in front of the woman, there were dozens of zombies kneeling on the ground, and most of them were flying zombies. There were almost no purple zombies, white zombies, green zombies, hair zombies, and so on in the early stage. Sumo was wondering where the zombies had gone. The woman sitting cross-legged gave her the answer. She reached out with one hand. 5 slender, grayish-white fingers grabbed a furry zombie. The hairy Jiangshi didn't resist at all. Then, the hair zombie in the woman's hand gradually shrank. Whoosh! The most incredible scene happened. The woman raised her hand, and the hair zombie that had shrunk to 3 inches was directly thrown into her mouth and swallowed. Hiss! The scene looked like a human eating another human. Sumo could not help but frown, while the little white pig kept humming. Sumo felt a little disgusted, and the little white pig seemed to be very envious. However, the little white pig restrained itself, because the soul aura on the woman was the most fragrant. It was waiting for the last delicious meal. The human and the beast had different tastes. Sumo and the little white pig did not move. The woman sitting cross-legged did not seem to notice Sumo and the little white pig. She just grabbed the zombies in front of her and ate them one by one. Every time she ate a zombie, the woman changed slightly. Gradually, the woman's complexion became better, and the light in her eyes became brighter. It was like a process of nourishment and nurturing. The dead female cultivator was slowly turning from a dead cultivator to a living cultivator by eating the zombie cultivators. The soul aura on her body gradually gathered. When she ate the last flying zombie, the female cultivator closed her eyes and made a hand seal while sitting cross-legged. There were only 3 simple movements of the seal. However, Sumo slightly raised his eyebrows again, because he felt that the 3 hand seals were familiar. As the hand seals were made, the wings of the woman's nose flashed, and there was a weak breath. At that moment, a cold light flashed in Sumo's eyes. Puppet's soul recovery. Sumo's heart trembled as he recalled an ancient secret technique. "Oomph. Kill her," Sumo shouted. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.